mute.
Yeah, I was gonna say mute.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, boys and girls.
Welcome to Fenway Park.
Well,
Are you muted and your
Sounds
volume's
like a
up?
conference meeting in my office every day.
Dan?
Do I shut down my speaker too, or just my mic, John?
I would do both if I was you. Just connect with the video once.
Which means I'm going to forget next time I need to have them on.
Okay, I can't hear anything. When you're ready to, I'm sorry.
Oh, we're live too? My Teams opens up every time with the camera on and the sound off.
So normally when we're meeting, I shut down the camera and the thing, and then I forget and go to the meeting. I'm like, I can't hear. Oh, right. Welcome to the April 24th, 2024 meeting of the Facilities and Improvement Committee. We're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Full house again. Great.
Mr. Chairman, if you
Yeah.
could indulge me just for a moment.
Of course.
I'd like to ask for a moment of silence in remembrance of Bill Spencer. Bill Spencer was a member of the Budget Committee for 25 years and was chairman of the Budget Committee for many years and was instrumental in so many things. And he had the faith and the confidence of the entire town. He passed away, he was in his upper 80s. He was a world-class distance runner, ranked in the top 10 in the country for his age bracket. So Bill was a guy who will be missed. He provided so much to the town over a 25-year period. So I'd just like to ask for just a moment of silence. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good, Dan.
All right, so for today we have, my computer obviously died right before I came in here, so I can work off my cell phone. We have a couple things on the agenda. I think we're going to start with, at the last meeting we did the walkthrough. It wasn't televised, but we did a walkthrough with the committee of GMS so that everyone could kind of get on the same page of seeing everything. One of the questions that was asked was, can you kind of spell out all of the operational needs, deficiencies, and whatnot? And I think one of the most important things that we need to achieve as a group right now is like really coming up with what are those things, and so that we can actually figure out how we address them. A lot of this project has been, evaluating this project has been going on for such a long time. I've come into this, it was well in advance of me coming into it. So some of the stuff that gets passed down is some form of institutional knowledge, and I think it's dangerous to always rely on institutional knowledge without actually revisiting and making sure that it's accurate. So one of the things that we really want to achieve today is getting an idea of what is the accurate state of affairs over there, so we can really figure out what the options are to move forward. Ultimately, I think there's a component of this that we want to get an idea of what's going on, but we also need to get a feel from the community, right? So before we even start diving into solutions again, I think at our next meeting we'll start talking about how we can reach out and get some accurate information from the community about what their goals are, right? Is it 100% cost? Like, is it certain educational things, or whatever it is, right? We need to get a feel from the community at large too. So we will be doing that moving forward too. But today we have Kyle with us as well, Kyle Barker, who's the architect that's been working with us on this. And one of the reasons that we have him here today is because he couldn't come to the next meeting, and I didn't want to wait for a whole month because I thought that might be a long time for us to be able to take some action on some of the stuff we need to do. So luckily he has done a lot of we've already paid him to do a lot of legwork. So this was a good opportunity for the committee to be able to ask specific questions, get specific answers, and help maybe poke holes in where we need to get more information. So so we'll start with Dan, we'll move on to that, and then if we have some time, we might get into the mission, vision, composition stuff that we want to talk about, but I have a feeling we probably won't within the 2 hours.
So first off, I'll give these to, Carrie was not at the walkthrough and Richard on the walkthrough. These are the, that is a updated, newly drawn map, so you can kind of get a sense of the composition of the building. So I've given everyone 2 documents to review, and actually were both requested after our walkthrough, either by the whole committee or members of the committee. So the first one I'll point out is just basically the rooms list and the rooms assignment. It gives you a sense of how the rooms are used, what they're utilized for, and it's just basically the room numbered list. You also realize that through construction, through additions, through non-use, there are a number of numbers that are just no longer, the room is there, but it's not being used, including, luckily one of our office staff has been around for a while, so she could point out that before we had the 4-unit portable, we actually had an original 2-unit, and there was assigned rooms, and instead of giving new rooms the same number, they just kept adding on. So while it looks like we have 45 rooms, we really don't have that many rooms in use. So that's just to kind of peruse, to kind of see how the rooms in the building are utilized. I've added notes so that you can see in rooms where we may have various uses. So for instance, room 17, what when we call it the speech room, what that looks like, how many speech pathologists are utilizing that room, as well as room 28, where you it's a multi-purpose room where you have 4 or 5 staff that utilize it at any point during the day. And then the second document, which is kind of the driving thing, which was I was asked to basically kind of, the best I could come up with, I think the most honest term that I come up with, operational needs and concerns. And so this comes with the expertise that comes with the Masters of Education and nothing more than that. So I have no engineering, no architecture design. This is basically just kind of a statement of what we see on a day-to-day basis, just kind of running and operating the school. And so the first thing that I wanted to kind of point out as we think through this is to not think of GMS as...
Brandon, can you just mute your mic? Or is it?
You should be able to mute it.
Can I? I'm not on the computer.
I think isn't Dan?
Are you on there? Are you running it?
No, I think John was.
Oh, it's already done. All right.
I am, but I don't have mute ability for some reason. So when it comes to GMS, I find it helpful to not think of it as one single unit because it wasn't constructed that way. You really kind of have 4 to 5 units that we need to think through as we kind of look towards the future of it. So you have obviously the 30s building, and then kind of unit 2 would be that 50s, 60s addition, which is kind of the white square that's down towards the road. Then you have the 70s, 80s, which really is kind of the spine of the building now. It's kind of the most solid part. Then you have the portables, and then the 5th would be just the site, generally the outdoors. And so when we talk about operational needs, concerns, or just facts, some things apply to certain units, some things apply to all units. And so I've tried to kind of draw that out, and basically from my own brain, I tried to categorize it. So I came it down to your category areas of HVAC concerns, envelope concerns, building operation, functionality, and then locational and site kind of operational concerns. These are just a list of the day-to-day things. And so I'll give you a chance to kind of review it, and I will answer any questions. I don't know if you want me to read through them for the...
As we go through too, I think it would be helpful, Kyle, if there's anything, because you've done like actual studies on some of these things, so if we're it's really important to me that we get these things right and that we're presenting them accurately. And my hope is that as a committee we can really make sure of that. Sure. So if there's anything that we're not hitting on properly, please, help jump in, or if there's anything that was missed or whatever.
Yeah, and I kind of put and I think we'll make these documents public as part of our documents for everyone to see. But as I put it, it's operational, but it's also having been part of the team that's worked alongside Kyle for 2 years to kind of pick things up. So HVAC, you just kind of have the poor air control, the poor airflow, moisture issues, air quality, unit reductions of usable square footage. That's just basically that some of the HVAC units that we have right now are currently bulky. And so when we talk about square footage in classrooms, some of those are kind of those floor based. And so when you look at the square footage, you lose upwards of 30 square feet because you just got this monster box.
As we go down through this, can we talk about each one of these subcategories?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, jump in. I mean, if you have.
So, on the HVAC, and this is Kyle, so we're looking at that, there's this combination of baseboard heat down there, unit ventilators, rooftop units. It's all hot water as far as I know, except for the, whatever's on the roof and the one, I think it's the 83 section that has a rooftop unit. But couldn't we fix that if we put a new roof on and added rooftop units and air condition that building? It would give us the moisture control we're looking for.
That's what we would need to do.
Can
as-
you,
as
can
well
you,
as heat.
Why don't you come sit up here so you're on the mic?
And I'm asking these questions in the fashion because there's a lot of people in town that think the brick and mortar that exists down there is probably still usable, but what can we do to make the building a better place? And I'm asking from that direction, just so you understand why I'm taking the tack that I am taking.
So in my report, I basically did a list. Those are the items. So not everything is a cost issue, but HVAC was certainly one of those, but just one. So
Right.
out of 80 different items, there's probably,
And we're
50
talking
or
about
so.
just the HV, that's why I want to break it out, so to not
Yeah.
get it confused.
Thank you.
So,
Would you say that the HVAC is a top priority?
yes,
Yes.
it's one of the biggest cost items.
Plus, from a usability standpoint, because of the moisture issues
Yep.
through the years,
Yep.
HVAC is top priority.
Yes, because when you have a hot, humid day,
Yeah.
and the ventilation system is bringing in outside air,
Yeah.
it's bringing in that humidity without taking the humidity out. It then condenses on the cold concrete and concrete block. That's where your moisture problem is coming from. So if you put in air conditioning, it wrings out that moisture before it comes in the building, and that would solve the moisture problems.
okay, so that's all I want to know is, so when we talked about the original thing and the purpose for going to the site walk is, what can be saved?
Right.
What's absolutely not repairable, to put together something for the voters.
Right.
So in this case, HVAC, which is although a large project, would cure a bunch of problems.
I have a question regarding HVAC. I know back when we did another study many years ago,
Yeah.
one of the conversations that came up was the lack of controls. Because someone one day thought it'd be a brilliant idea to save money by canceling the controls contract. And I don't know if they still do it today, but in my day, when you canceled the controls, you canceled the controls.
Right.
So we lost control of the building. Has that part been rectified? Do we actually have control of the HVAC system? Because we can talk about upgrading and fixing our HVAC system, but if our sensors aren't working and our controllers aren't working,
Wouldn't that be
Carrie,
updated?
it'd be great if there was sensors.
Terry,
The sensor's a valve.
I'm gonna answer, I don't know, but I did read somewhere that recently they discovered the control operation and it's being looked at, and most of them are accessible. I do not know what the status of it is, but I do know that recently
right?
that was.
Because
discovered that
Super
potentially-
simple sense system.
Well, that's, I mean, that's one solution. The other question I had is because when we were doing the COVID and ESSER, they went through and they found like fans that were actually not connected. They were in the storage room awaiting repair, but had never been repaired nor replaced.
Yes.
So have we actually, is our system actually functional to begin
Yeah.
with?
Well, so
It's operational.
to directly answer your question, no, the control system is archaic, and it should be updated, and that's not cheap as well. So the
No,
mechanical
wasn't it
system is a
5
certain
years ago?
cost, the control system is a different cost. And so each of these start to add up.
But if we put a new roof on the building, put brand new units on the roof.
Yep.
They have brand new controls for that anyway, at that point, right?
Well, yeah, and
So,
To solve the moisture system, you gotta put in individual room control.
yeah.
So honestly, you're talking about a new EMS. To do that with rooftop, which frankly should be.
You'd have dampers in the system.
We
That's-
also consider the new outdoor air requirements because of COVID, and they pump in a ton of fresh air, which is great when it's freezing in your room.
so I believe in my report, which Actually, the date on this is going back a little while.
Is this
So
part of
every-
the document you gave us access to? I haven't got through the
So-
345-page one yet.
I need to figure out what's where.
Which one's that you're referencing there,
uh,
Show, turn around so I see.
yeah, this is I believe I gave you this back in December.
That's when you re-looked at it.
And that's when I re-looked
Yeah.
at it, and I updated some of the numbers, but basically with inflation,
doesn't
every
look
6
familiar.
months, we got updated again.
Yep.
So I get kind of called to the carpet, well, why is the numbers changing? Well,
I'm not
because-
calling you carpenter. I just wanted
Yeah, I
a
get it.
square answer about that, and I'm done.
So essentially.
I will find you the
So
document.
mechanical system, the entire building, the mechanical systems are archaic. They're old and need to be replaced, just as you mentioned. A cost for a new mechanical system is somewhere around $50 to $60 a square foot. So we've got a 50,000 square foot building. We're talking $3 million for the mechanicals.
Yep.
On top of that, it's another $5 a square foot for controls. Controls that we would put in these days is digital controls. So each unit could be accessed through a computer. So that way the maintenance person could adjust the heat, humidity,
the building.
cooling, anywhere within the district. So that's what we were planning for this. So if you wanted to do something less, then you're going to get less quality, but you're going to spend less. So there's a balance there between what you want and what the cost is.
So one of the questions is, at what point in our process are we saying we're going to
It's
just
not
go do
doable.
it? Well, or are we going to say let's just go do it, or have we? At what point of evaluation do we have to get to? Because, like, for example, one of the things that Kyle will talk about is the different sections and, like, structurally which sections might be worth saving, which ones may have more challenges. Do we want to go through and do all of the HVAC in all of those sections to then maybe not have those all be worth preserving?
I know there's two looks at this. There's usability, how you teach in it, and then there's usability of the building itself.
Right.
And I think one of the things you have to dispel before anybody's going to even talk about a new building is that literally, looking at this pragmatically, there is no way that we can fix that building and have usable square foot. That's
So I've done multiple studies on multiple options. And one of the options I did early on, actually, was to look at additions renovations. And I think I came up with a fairly good plan to be able to do that. And I compared it to the quality of a new building. So if you were to say, well, we don't need the quality of the new building, all right, then the cost is going to come down a little bit. But for my purposes, for the study, for the district, I looked at the same square footage, the same usable space, the same quality of systems, but new versus existing. The result has been that the additions renovations are less money. But when you look at it over the life of the bond, there are certain things that you can't completely upgrade, like the insulation. We can't get insulation in the foundation. We can't get.
agreed.
There's a few
I
things
understand
that can't
Yeah.
come up to the same quality. So when you look at the life cycle cost, the cost for the energy, also the cost for human resources, that when you have a brand new building, there's less things to fix. If you've got a 50-year-old building, even if it's been renovated, things are going to break more often and you're going to have a higher cost. So when you look at the full lifespan of the building, the cost between the two options is very small. And so that the decision shouldn't be on, are we going to save $2 million this year or $5 million? It should be on what you think is best for the district long term, and it's specifically the education. That's always been my recommendation.
They're not going to give them a new building unless they answer these questions.
Yeah.
And that's what we're working on. So I'm just, you've said to me more or less, and I'm going to just recap that real quick. Yes, we could put new ventilation system
Yes.
on the building and end up with quality ventilation.
Yes.
Okay.
So,
That was it. Just wanted to get,
Yep.
I'm gonna challenge that a little bit, right? Even if we do a new HVAC, the 2017 Turner report showed that the HVAC may not solve the moisture problems. The DOE at that time was willing to look at it and try it, but the moisture especially dealing with the cold slab and wicking through, may not be solved by HVAC.
the
So-
wicking
I
through
disagree.
concept, it's not a thing, is it? I mean,
No. So I think what's happened is the previous architect, going back 20 years,
it would be lifting the tiles off the floor if that water was migrating.
there's
through
a whole
the floor.
bunch of evidence that you would see that we're not seeing. And so what the previous architect had said was that it was somehow coming through, but I think he misunderstood the science. If you really think through the science, what's really happening is what I said earlier, that the moisture is coming in through the ventilation systems, coming through doors and windows that are left open, and it's condensing on the
It's a cold
surfaces,
floor.
just like when you take a soda can out of the refrigerator on a hot, humid day and it starts to sweat. It's not coming through the aluminum. It's coming from the air and condensing on it.
Was that not the analogy I used?
And so I've looked at this, and there are some solutions beyond the HVAC. There's ways to, basically, we could put in an after the fact radon system that could help to basically get the moisture out of the building from below the slab even. There's other things like that could happen.
Kyle,
So-
I don't want to kill the thing. I just, for brevity, like we can just go through that. But
Yeah.
the original assumption, so I'm trying to point out, is that some of the stuff that was out there
is
were not
correct.
true assumptions. That
Yeah.
the water's wicking through the concrete, it'd be lifting the tiles off the
It would.
floor.
It would. Well, you got to be careful when you ask me a question like that, because I can ramble on for a
I
really long
I
time.
can too, and I'm trying to be
Uh-oh, the
cognizant
two of us,
of
we're gonna be
everybody.
Give me
dangerous.
the hint.
All right, so moving on to the next section.
Let's do that, and then we can. Oh, did you?
Ron, I'd like for you to jump in. You've kind of been doing a deep dive on this. Anytime you feel that you have something, make sure you step in. And
Have you ever known Ron to not step in?
Rich, I've been sitting here and listening to exactly what's happening, and the good thing about it, if you remember the last meeting, I said exactly what Kyle did, and I think what Ray just said. So I will, if I disagree, I'll say something. How's that?
I appreciate it.
And I'll shut
But I
up.
appreciate-
to monopolize the time.
And I appreciate your
We'll
comments.
talk
Thank you.
afterwards so you can get it all out.
Yeah.
But I agree with everything we just said.
Go through.
So-
yeah.
But
So, yeah,
I'd like to go back to Dan and have him finish his.
So just for the next part, and I'm guessing that I'll introduce this section again. We'll probably, but so obviously there's some HX concerns. On top of that, you then lead into what are kind of observable and operational envelope concerns. So obviously we can look at fixing the HVAC, but I think that'd be a lot of money, literally going out some of the windows, because you have some envelope concerns. Again, I tried to break that down into the different, as I called them, units of the complex. So there's greater envelope concerns in the 50s, 60s section of the building, as opposed to the 70s, 80s. There's almost no envelope concerns in the portables. They're our nicest units, but they're still portables.
Yeah, for the process in my brain, I'm not even thinking about the portables at this point. Just the,
Yeah, I
the
wanted
actual
to.
bricks and mortar building. I only have one question on the envelope, and that's the joists are deteriorating or deteriorated. And foundation cracking and settling. There are a couple of cracks, and you also talk about under building operation, the bowing. I think that was the original pour on the concrete. Dave Ross and I talked about
Yeah,
that.
and these are all that I've gathered from I have, again, a master's in education. I can't tell you about the joists when the connecting
as far
building.
as the envelope
But Dave has pointed out
structure.
that they are deteriorating, if not deteriorated. Again, every time you put an addition on, there's joists, and some of those joists are 70 to 80 years old. So
Right,
they tend to go.
and Liberty, the Statue of Liberty is older than that, and so is the Empire State
Have they been
Building.
inspected?
The joists don't
Dave would
deteriorate
be able
unless
to
they're
answer.
wet.
Dave Ross
They're
will be
wet,
able to.
yeah.
By-
The,
by like
the ones on the
structural
50 and
engineers.
60 one.
Yeah.
In the 50 section,
Yeah,
Are-
you'd have to.
structurally not sound.
What's interesting is that the design is not great for shedding water.
Right, that's that,
Color
Yeah.
surprise.
yeah.
Yeah, you could see the water splashing on the wall, and where the mildew has actually built up pretty thick on.
Yeah, and
in some
I didn't
areas.
point that out
And
on the
that's-
tour yesterday, but when we're over on the new egress, you can actually see there's watermarks where it comes off the roof and literally goes down and then
Black.
right down the building.
What I'm talking about is the structural joists, he points out in specific, the presents joints, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about the structural joists. I agree with you about the water shedding in the wrong places, it's
Yeah.
bouncing off the wall and it's deteriorating the wall.
Can I just suggest that
That's a new issue.
what I would like to
Easy
see
fix.
going forward sometime is to answer these questions, you gotta go look at them. We have to
Yeah.
spend some money to go definitively see them and have somebody look at them.
How much did you look at in your analysis of the current building? Because I know you did some exploration to know that the 50s, 60s have no, from what we can tell, any insulation. But like, how much did you look at in terms of the actual structure?
Basically, what's called a non-invasive, I just looked at what you could see from standing on the ground. I
And-
didn't poke my head up through the ceilings, I didn't pull down any soffits to look inside, but
I
from
did.
the outside, you can see where the plywood is separating, you can see inside and see the joists that are.
Where I pointed out where we have the kind of the chicken wire covering because we had the bird invasion, the bird cut through. If you go into the classroom and you pop the ceiling tile, just 2 steps up, you can see daylight. So there's no insulating wall. There's no extension of the exterior wall up into the ceiling there. So you can peek your head up and you can actually see
So can you,
the daylight through the cracks where
Has that ever been addressed? Has that ever been addressed? So
Uh,
taking measures to fix it?
it was discovered last year,
Okay.
and I know that Dave got a quote on it, and he could better.
I
but
think
the-
he
the-
said, we have to double check, I think he said that he had one side that was actually repaired, one side is bird proofed.
I think they foam
Put the
filled
wire
it.
up, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
again, that's a standard maintenance problem, I mean, to address. So, you have to maintain the envelope to keep it being envelope, otherwise it's a sieve.
Yeah.
And caulking fails, joints fail, and we do live in the Northeast, so we do have freeze thaw to think about, and if that does have an effect, especially where masonry is getting wet and then it freezes, it spalls off.
Yep.
Which is in that one section, you can see where there's some spalling off of the brick. But, okay, I'm good, moving on.
Before we move on,
Yeah.
I just, sort of the transition from the HVAC to the envelope, and your first question, Ray, was if we assume we put a whole new roof over the entire building, can we put all the HVAC in it? Kyle, can you address the status of the roof?
And the envelope, I think, and the envelope, right? Because that was going to be my question. Was can you talk a little bit about
You know,
the?
and yes, caulk replacement and, keeping the birds out of the pantry, are maintenance things, but if you spend 20 or 30 decades not doing any maintenance, then it stops being in need of maintenance. It needs something a whole lot more than that. So, yeah, could you sort of talk about
There
the
is
roof and the envelope in terms of it being a critical component of the HVAC problem?
I wouldn't say it's a critical component of the HVAC problem, it's just yet another problem. What I've said in the past is that there's no one fatal flaw in the building. The building suffers from 1,000 cuts. So when you look at each of these problems, they could be solved with money, but when you add up the money of the total project, it ends up being a lot. And so it gets to the point where you have to make a decision, is it worth it? You can do it, but is it a good idea? Are you just throwing money after
I
that?
understand that. I wasn't looking for advocacy. I'd like to know what's wrong with the roof.
It just needs to be replaced.
What's the current age of the roof? I've forgotten.
It's all connected.
Well,
Right.
it has a lifespan, so I'm curious as to where in that lifespan we are.
I don't know what each
I mean,
section would be.
Has the 1983 built section ever been re-roofed? Because that would tell us it's, 40 years
I'm gonna
old.
make an assumption because I was up there last summer. It appears to be a single roof, so I believe whatever's up there
I
was.
think the whole building's been re-roofed.
I believe it's one single.
Because
roof.
it would be good
I
to
believe
know.
right now it's at one single roof unit. So when you go up there, it's not obviously there's leaks and there's seals and things like that.
But
But it
good- yeah.
appears as whatever the roof, the entire main building unit is one single.
Because that would be good to know, just out
I
of
don't know the
curiosity
age
as to
though.
what it is, because if we are in year 25 of a 30-year roof, we'd be due for maintenance and a replacement anyway. So it's not really necessarily adding to the cost, because that would be routine maintenance to begin with.
So I guess the question is from a structural perspective.
If
right?
Ross said he's on the road, but he said I could text him. we'll see if he
So
texts
from a
back.
structural perspective, if we're talking about doing HVAC and we're talking about doing the roof,
Well, if you're doing HVAC, you should do the roof.
right. But if we're talking about that, like, the roof is on top of the rest of the envelope, right? So, and one of the things that you've talked about in the past are envelope related issues. So can you just touch on those? Because I think one thing we have to figure out is can the envelope be fixed such that the roof could be fixed such that we can put HVAC on it, right? Or am I thinking about that the wrong way?
So let me address that. First of all, a lot of the data that I have in here is based on the Turner Group report and previous reports. The Turner Group report didn't suggest re-roofing. I don't even have that in the budget. So if we're talking about re-roofing, that's an add to the budget.
So my original thought process and what I said at the last meeting is if you take and you re-insulate the roof, insulated, because most commercial buildings in those categories weren't well insulated.
Right.
Insulated, new curbing for your HVAC units, new roof,
Proper flashing.
yeah.
You're adding to the budget.
Okay, so that's not even,
That's not even on the
not
list.
even in there.
No, not re-insulating it and not putting in a new roof.
Because there's existing standing water and there's drainage issues coming off that roof with the roof drains that are there, so you're gonna need to talk about repitching the roof, because even though it's a flat, there should be a pitch.
Exactly. So
There's known drainage, so now you're talking about new roof, basically reconstruction of the roof. It's not just putting down new top layment on it, and and in order to do it, we gotta solve the roof drain issues.
yeah, so the problem really isn't the condition of the roof. The problem is the design of the roof. That, as we were saying, that the roof pitches down, but then the soffit pitches back, and so the water is just running over the side of the roof and running back into the building, causing the roof joist to rot. And so, yeah, that's not even part of it. Now, with the rest of the envelope, again, I'm looking at, as Dan pointed out, the different areas, and they have different concerns. The 40s and 50s wings have the biggest concern as far as the envelope. The roof edges, also the walls. When you look at the backside of the building, when you see the concrete block, if you go inside, that's the same concrete block. There is no there's no wall there, it's just the concrete block. So there's very little separation between inside and outside, and that's why we're getting some of the spalling, that's why we're getting some of the cracking. It's a very low value construction. This is not quality construction. Now, if we were to, again, I'm trying to analyze this all fairly, so each option is compared to the same new construction. If we bring that building up to current codes, which according to the State Department of Education, you should be, that would mean adding in seismic loading. It would mean insulating it. There's a lot of work that would have to go on, and the 40s and 50s wing, in my opinion, it gets to the point where you're throwing good money after bad. And so the plan that I had looked at would be to replace that section with new construction, salvage the 80s wing, and be able to use the space where the 40s and 50s is to improve the drainage. What the gentleman said was that, yeah, there's, and on the 80s wing in particular, all the building, but in the 80s wing, there's scuppers that dump the water from the roof just on the ground right next to the building. That's part of the problem.
They piped it into underground pipe, and it freezes in the winter.
That's the back
It
side.
backs
The
up
front,
the roof
the front
drains.
side, it's a fire hose coming out right by the front entrance.
It's bad. It's bad. It needs to be fixed. So that's just yet another thing about the envelope that doesn't really work well. Not that easy to fix in a renovation, but it could be fixed.
Can I just take a step back?
Yeah, sure.
I'm hesitant. It sounds like we're kind of getting into a little tailspin like we have before.
Yeah.
My observation is people want to see somebody go into the building and look and answer all the questions that are being brought up now. And I have no trouble supporting, yes, a conclusion that the joists are beyond repair. The roof is $25 million or some crazy number. The problem is, until we actually move ahead and have somebody look at it definitively,
Yeah.
we will have this conversation for the next 100 years. And all I'm suggesting is, instead of trying to answer the questions tonight, in general, I agree, and this is where I would like to go, is potentially an HVAC system solves the humidity. But is it throwing good money after bad? I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
So I believe we need to come up with a means and spend some money to have somebody hired to physically go in and evaluate these elements, the critical elements of the building, so that these issues can be understood without speculation.
I agree, it's a good idea. What I'm trying to do right now, though, is to educate the committee as to what all the reports in the past have come up with, so that we can come up with an understanding.
I'm thinking of people listening to this
Yeah.
and saying, okay, here we go again.
Yeah,
I just want to, my recommendation is, before we move anything, we somehow come up with a plan to have somebody look and evaluate the building thoroughly and answer the questions that
So I think through this conversation, what we're benefiting from, though, is the fact that now I think that that's a great recommendation, right? So
Right.
can we have someone do a structural analysis, and what is that going to entail? Is it,
That's fine.
But-
Hey, all I was saying
Yeah,
is, what made me stop the conversation was Kyle saying, that's how we got back to, and we think we got to head there, to keeping the core and building a new section.
Okay, yeah. So
That's
let's
why
stay
I
with
stopped
the-
you there.
Stay with the concerns and not get into the
Yeah,
solutions.
The solution, yeah.
Good.
Don't
Thank you.
jump to the solution until we have
Thank
the conditions.
Well, so, and just to explain a little bit more, that you're right that further investigation is a good idea, but it doesn't always take a PE to look at a 40-year-old boiler that's belching smoke and say it needs to be replaced. And so if we can get through the simple stuff and then get down to, all right, we're really serious about additions, renovations, let's get into the next deep dive into that. That's when we bring in that person to do that. I don't think it's worth doing it right now until we get through the entire list that Dan's got.
Can I just question that thought?
Sure.
The reason being is until you know what the level, and I use the word restore.
Yeah.
Restore any section, whether it be the 40s, 50s, or whatever. Restore it to serviceable condition. So, reasonable maintenance is now what
Yep.
you have in front of you. Until you know that answer, it's difficult to say whether it's should be discarded or not.
Well, I think we've got that.
Right, so
I think we've got that.
And I don't think we do.
So I agree with you, but I think we can all agree here that the HVAC is time, right? The newest boiler is 1990 something. And for a commercial boiler, they're 80%, 85% efficient. For an oil boiler at that point, I mean, you're legitimately just throwing money out to have the thing operate. So Kyle, I'm sorry, I don't know your last name. You said you came up with like $5.5 million to replace the HVAC, right? That included the controls.
No, it was less than that.
I think it was 3 plus.
Yeah.
3 plus the controls.
I was just spitballing the numbers though.
Okay. So, because I think when I was talking when we did the tour last week, my quick estimate was $7 million to replace the HVAC with air source heat pumps and individual controls with the BMS.
Could be.
So that's just my knowledge from doing BAE, right? So, I mean, the $5.5 million, you said it was $50 a square foot.
Yeah, what are you using for square foot number?
At BAE, so typically to include HVAC in a new system, I'm using $600 a square foot for a commercial office space. Back that off to HVAC, I'm somewhere in around the $60 to $65 a square foot right now.
Okay, so we're not that far off.
Yeah, so
It's a 50,000 square foot building.
Oh, okay, sorry, I thought you said 100,000, that's why.
No, 50,000 square
Okay,
foot
so
building.
it's 50,000.
At 60 is 3 million.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep, so I thought it was 100,000, so my bad math.
Yep.
But still, it's call it, it's
Yep.
another $5 a square foot.
For the controls.
So it's $3.25 million.
Yep.
Add 20% for overruns and unknown surprises,
Yep.
and all the other good stuff, right? You're at 4.1.
Yeah, when you get soft costs and
Yep.
contingencies.
Yeah.
Somewhere around. So, yeah,
I'll go with your numbers, right? 3.5.
Yeah.
So I think a roof, right? If we're gonna try to section this out and see what it is gonna be to fix it, we gotta go figure out what it's gonna take to properly fix the roof, not just throw a new layman on it. And so properly fix it. For the envelope, we should do a structural analysis or an envelope, whether it's a structural engineer or commercial contractor to come out and take a look at it and give quotes. But then, I mean, essentially, you're also looking at new electrical.
well,
Oh,
so
yeah, absolutely.
so let me stop you for a second. I think,
We're not even there yet.
and tell me if you think I'm off base, but I think if it makes sense to get through all of the things that Kyle analyzed, and then I think if the committee says, great, I still think that those are all, we could achieve all those things. Kyle has a number, but if we think we can do it for 10 million for some reason, then we can talk about spending money to go hire the, structural engineers or whatever. But we haven't made through all the items yet. I don't know if
I think we're good, and this might just be me, and I'm sure it is. So far I've written down 2 things on here: can be fixed, HVAC envelope can be fixed.
But
Building
my-
operations, electrical and stuff like that, I'm gonna write down can be fixed because it can be. And then we've said that, right? At some point, and I talked to Andrew about this, is that if you don't come to the voters with a two choices, you're never gonna go anywhere. We're at the point where we need to do something, because doing nothing is putting the kids in a bad spot because of politics.
Well, that, and we're just
It's-
making the issue worse because we're not maintaining what we have.
Because we're not maintaining it, we're not putting any money in, it's getting worse. So you need to come up with a good renovation proposal that's a solid can-do number, and the new school proposal. Maybe you do them both in parallel, but they have to be honest and they can't be disingenuous. You can't say it's gonna cost $37 million to renovate the school or restore it, as it was brought up, and $37 million to build a new one. People, that's not a choice.
Well, I think Ron said last week there's a difference between a renovation and a rehab, right? If you do a renovation, you have to bring it up to all the new codes, all the new classroom sizes. If it's a rehab, we're not bound by that requirement.
I would call it restoration. Restore the building to existing.
But you go through the building and you fix the mechanical stuff, then you have to fix the cosmetic issues
Kyle,
as
can you
well.
speak to that though? Because I want to make sure we're clear on that.
It's an order of operations thing first. Like, you can't replace the HVAC and then think
absolutely.
about the roof, right? Like,
No,
you gotta repair the
together.
structure first,
Right.
then you're gonna put a new roof down, then you're gonna do your HVAC. So it's not necessarily a restore. It's you need to do it in the right order, and
that's
those
a good
each have
point.
costs. And some of the things you have to do together, and so those all have the combined cost.
Right, like if you want to put new ductwork in the ceilings, you have to take down the ceilings, you might as well replace them.
Right.
So now the scope is creeping and it's hard to isolate those
Any
things.
renovation, and I've been doing remodeling for the last 30 years.
Which it needs
Every
all new
time you start a
ceilings.
remodel,
It needs
you
new ceilings.
look at it and say, yeah, it's gonna cost me X to redo this wall. The minute you open that wall, you find the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing. And a building of this age is gonna have those things. So that contingency that we're gonna have to put in this is gonna be substantial.
Well,
I think
so
I think
let me answer that question about
Yeah.
when you have to bring it up to code and when you don't, and rehabilitation versus restore. Another factor that gets thrown into that would be the building aid. If you're anticipating getting building aid, which you can get on additions renovations, you would have to bring it up to code. And so we're talking, by my calculations, potentially $12 million at stake. And so if you're looking for the big numbers here, we should start with the building aid. And so if the current plan is to get the number down, if that's the impetus to this group is to get the number down, we should be looking at those type of things.
I also don't think it should be
Just
something
back
we're
up.
avoiding bringing a building up to code. Like, that should be part of our goal. We should be trying to bring the building up to code. Why would we wanna send our children to a building that is not code compliant?
Again, in what codes are we talking about? I mean, do we have to add sprinkler systems?
Yes.
It should be there, yes, it's school.
Yes.
It's required.
And sprinklers save buildings, not necessarily lives, but they save buildings, and it's not a bad thing. But again, we got the ceilings down because we just did all this new ventilation. We could put sprinklers in.
But I
They
mean,
added
someone made the point. I think it was you that made the point last time that it's not just saving buildings, right? It's also providing
Buys time.
Buys time for kids to get out of
Yep.
a building that is laid out in a not the easiest building
We
to
should
get
be
in
trying
and
to
out.
avoid bringing the building up to code. I think that's a huge mistake.
No, I agree with you. But I mean, what are the codes we have to do? Seismic? Do we have to come up with seismic code? That's crazy.
Once you,
The ADA, though, I mean,
Huh?
the ADA compliant.
yeah, it does. If you renovate the building, I think it's more than 25% of the value of the current structure. You have to bring it entirely up to code, including seismic, and we are in a seismic zone.
So that's the point. I
building
want
is
to
the only
start
option.
and ask the question. Can we approach
Seriously.
this to restore the building to reasonable service and fix some of these problems? And I appreciate the notion of want to bring everything up to code, but the answer to that is $37 million. That's where we were comparing 37 to 44.
Well, but I thought that included two additions.
It does,
It does.
because it says, okay, the answer was you can't, the conclusion was the old sections are not restorable, so we tear them down.
Okay.
I'm not convinced that's the answer yet, and that's what I need to understand, Is that really the conclusion? They are not worth saving. And until I know that, and I'll tell you why. Because right now we have 24 total classrooms. How many do you think are in the old section?
What do you
24.
mean, in the 1930s building or? In the-
Yeah, 19, no, in the 50s building. The one
We're
that
not
was-
using 1930s, so they don't count.
I didn't know, well, I didn't know if he
No,
was
but
saying.
50s and
6, is there 6?
3.
3?
13.
What?
He's talking the 50s, 60s building.
56.
Oh,
Of
56.
the entire
Donut
field.
shaped
Yeah.
building.
There's
That's why I
13
asked
out
the
of
question.
24 classrooms in that section. So think about just throwing out 13.
Well, I don't disagree with you that you need multiple estimates here, right? You need to know the costs
Right.
of each different
But
scenario.
the
There's
question,
scenarios of tearing down those sections and rebuilding and remodeling and restoring the rest. There's a scenario of restoring the whole thing, and then there's the new construction scenario, right? Like, each one of those scenarios comes with a price tag. And the voters and us as a committee need to know what those prices are.
and so I think the question that we're trying to come to right now is how much money do we spend on different, how far do we investigate and how much money do we spend to do that? And some of that I think needs to be driven by some of the data that we already have. Like, I think that's what Kyle's advocating is like, let's look at the data. And if you still think at the end of looking at the data, yes, let's go get all those things. And absolutely, we should make that a directive.
And I'm kind of trying to do this like sushi. I'm eating one bite at a time.
Yeah.
Like HVAC. Although I know it connects to all the rest of it.
Right.
But is that a thing? Is
Right.
this a thing? I have another question.
Yeah.
When did seismic get added to the renovation to bring it up to code? Because I'm pretty sure LMS and CHS are not built to seismic. I know this building
But it was
isn't.
over how much percent of the building that you had to?
I'd have to look it up, but there is a threshold.
Because we just put a ton of money into LMS and we didn't bring that up to seismic standards. We didn't know structural on that.
And that's,
But I
I
mean,
wasn't
these
the
are the
architect,
kind
I
of
don't know.
things that apples for apples, right? If we did a renovation project to LMS and we didn't do seismic, why should we do it? At
Well, you didn't get
CHS?
state building aid on
So those
elements
are-
yet,
right, exactly.
and
So
that's where it
Those
kicks
are only
in.
triggered if we want state building aid.
Uh,
Assuming we don't hit the, and I think it's
Yeah,
50%.
the threshold.
Assuming we don't
Yeah.
hit the 50% mark.
It might be that.
We don't need, the only reason we would need to bring it to code is for state aid.
If you don't hit the threshold, the only reason you'd have to bring it up to code is
So we could
state
be
aid.
potentially spending multi-millions to get less millions.
Well, the state aid is not less millions. It's
Well, if
Potentially
my-
12
if my
million.
project is reduced to 10 million and I add 5 million to bring it to cost, I'm still not gonna get 5 million in aid.
It's worth having the conversation,
Yeah.
right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, but
We
what-
don't have to go. We as a committee, we can say it doesn't make sense to go for state aid.
Well, that's what I said. So I've always been prepared to move forward without state aid, because I think that if the taxpayers are gonna put forward a project, we should never rely on the state anyway. We should be, are we willing to foot the bill? If you truly believe in the project, are we willing to pay the cost of it? So to me,
But
state
if you
aid
can
should-
get, but on
If
the-
you can, sure, but
But
it
on,
should
well,
be.
but on the flip side,
but it
though,
shouldn't
if
be
you
a
can
penny
get
cost.
if you can get a better, because some of what we're talking about, some of what's being thrown around is, it doesn't really matter whether there's educational challenges. Like, we just have to get something done to get it done. And so I guess when you start to evaluate, okay, well, if we look at complying with state aid, if we get an extra 12 million for that, can we end up with a better building that's better for education? Right?
But we weren't slated for 12 million for a brand new project. How are we gonna get 12 million for a lesser renovation?
So that's a great question. That's a great question. So because we can now, with the fact that we failed, we can then re-up and represent our project and potentially qualify for more based off of the new.
So how
So-
many into
Am I
12
right
million?
with
We were
that?
at 7 million last year, so.
Well, so I've got your answer.
Okay.
So in my report, we studied 9 options. The very first option was repairs only, the restore option. That's in the report. 2 years ago, it was 14 million, or
Okay.
just about 15 million.
Okay,
So there's your answer.
But that
And
didn't-
basically takes this list,
right.
does all these items, and then adds soft cost to it in order to get up. This is about 10 million in repairs.
okay.
But it doesn't change the size of any room.
No.
It doesn't change the configuration, it doesn't change the program areas, it doesn't fix the special ed suites they're kind of funky.
It doesn't roof it. And it also
And it
doesn't,
doesn't
bring,
have the roof.
it doesn't bring the portables into the building, correct?
And it does not bring the portables into the building.
So it doesn't address the operational concerns.
No.
And,
No.
and so one thing we honestly have to figure out from the community is how much of that, how much do they expect us to be able to deliver something that addresses the educational impacts, right? Like, if the community at large says we don't care, then I'm not going to jam that down anyone's throats. I mean, I think it behooves us to try to figure that out.
And that's why we're doing this analysis. So we're doing the building first. I think you need to take it in chunks. You can't like go like this and say yes or no. So if we look at the building and we say the building can be renovated, then at this much money, let's look at the operational concerns from teaching, right? And how much does that add to this? And then you have a good picture. Then you have a good picture. I mean, you can't if you think you're going to bring another budget, another bond to the school, to the ballot next year, it's going to
So
pass.
this isn't a you. It's not a you. It's an us, right? That's why you're here.
Right.
This is-
Well,
we want.
no, but I mean, Dan keeps like saying that. I don't think it's going to fly.
No,
and that's
I was,
me.
I was just pointing. We're getting to it. That's what
Yeah.
I'm saying. I was just pointing us back to the document we've been talking about for the last week. Like,
Oh.
that's what I was just saying.
Yeah. So as we
I'm saying we're getting there.
get those pieces, then we can make a decision whether what to explore. And with all the land we have, is there really a good place on there to build that's not wet? When we get there.
Yes, I believe I've given this to the school board, and let me just check, make sure, and
Yeah.
I don't have copies of them with me today.
Yeah, Kyle,
I
I'll
can
coordinate
get
with
to
you to figure out what we need to relink. I haven't been the one responsible for linking it all. It is a nightmare.
I
It-
think what Ray's looking for is that list for other people to look at to get educated. This is your a la carte list. All of the fixes are here. This is what everything costs. You, Mr. Citizen at home, can do your own math. Add it up. This is the cost. Here it is. We've done the homework. Here's the other option. Here's another option.
Yeah.
That's what he's looking
But
for.
from a
And then
That's the list.
it goes out to the public in a fashion that no one can question,
Yep.
right? That no, it's not the document that they're hiding from you. Here it is. Here are all the options.
none of this has ever been intended to be.
I understand that, but
Just to be
Dan
clear.
brought that up early tonight about here's what they're not showing you. So
Yeah.
my idea is daylight it all,
Right.
bring it to the surface, and
So
let
the question then also becomes, when we put that stuff forward, how do we accurately convey to people, okay, this is like, when it's just that, this is just renovating it, but it doesn't address these, these operational needs.
Right.
But
So-
I think every option will have that, right? Like,
yeah.
every option will have its pros and cons, and one of the cons of a restoration or a restore is that it does not address any of the operational problems. The building stays framed exactly the way
Or
it is.
addresses some of them, but not all of them.
Potentially,
The
right.
outliers.
Depending
Yeah.
on like what you end up doing, right? If it's just literally fix everything that's broken right now and don't change the configuration of the building, that addresses none of the operational needs of classroom size or number of classrooms or any of that.
I'm saying it doesn't address that classrooms in a locker room where the nurses are in the mirror.
We're getting there. Hold on, wait.
So I'm just saying, like, each one of these options has its pros
Sorry,
and cons,
Dan,
and
we
those have to
hijacked
be
it.
laid out for people to see. And know that, like, okay, if I'm gonna vote for this one that's $10 million less, I'm gonna know that they're using the stage as a classroom, the nurses in the, whatever, the closet, or, and so on and so forth.
Yep. Dan, move on to your next section.
before something else happens.
Where do we leave off? I'm
Building operations.
Oh, okay, yeah. So
We were at the roof because I had questions on this before we got to the.
Please, by all
Well,
means.
I was waiting for us to get to the next bullet point.
Oh,
So
I'm
like
sorry.
exterior doors, the pictures I've seen, aren't a lot of them cut short? Is that a matter of some?
Dave conveyed this to me. So I do know that some of the exterior doors were shaved down because of so to allow for the temperature fluctuation. So I know
Okay.
that the one right by the 30s building, the room 10 area, I know that they shaved that one down because you get the expansion, and so they shaved it down so that it would close because it has to be the locking door. So what you're having is you have the sticking.
So how much, like, are we talking like?
They need
They
sweeps.
need something there because they were talking about having mice in the building and we are inviting them in with short doors. It's.
But yeah, but commercial, and another thing, that if they were all new doors, you wouldn't have that problem, because commercial doors age out, especially ones that are in a steel frame. As the frames start to rust at the bottom, the doors go like this.
Yep.
Right.
Kyle said yes.
I've
And the
replaced some of
sills
those.
tend to be aluminum, and they tend to grow up like this, and they lose their anchorage. So all of a sudden, you got a door that sticks or doesn't close all the way. So
Well,
That's regular. right?
$24,000
So it can be done over a period of
Huh?
time.
24,000 is in the
replace
budget for
doors.
doors.
24, so that solves the door problem.
Right.
And then I had a question.
You can write
Yep.
solved.
Windows, because we were at one point on a rotation where we were replacing, I think, four sets of windows a year. until we decided it was no longer a reasonable investment.
Yep.
There was a
Yep.
time when we were replacing a
They were
bunch of
doing more than
windows.
four.
It was, or was it a phase? There was, so these windows are not, a lot of the windows are not original to the building. There's a lot of windows that have been replaced. There was a plan and a schedule for the replacement of these.
Yes.
How far along did we get?
I wouldn't be able to answer that. Like, none in the last 4 years, I can tell you that much.
Yeah, it's not in the last
So I
10.
think that kind of a problem leads to more problems, right? The longer that takes to replace 4 windows at a time, the more other things break along the way, and now your maintenance list gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
Well, we've been saying that, we've got a lot of past budget committee members here, and we've said this for years about maintenance items not being addressed at all 3 buildings. And that's not just Griffin, that's LMS, which led to that debacle, and CHS. CHS, if they don't start maintaining it in the fashion they need to, will end up in the same position as GMS. Maintenance is a requirement.
Well,
That's
that's
what I
that's
mean.
part of what this committee,
Yeah.
this is our initial conversation, but part of this committee needs to start
And
addressing.
I love that this is gonna help maybe fix that problem for the long
No
term
matter
in the
what
town.
solution, like
Okay.
maintenance plans are critical for
Dan needs to go
Critical.
to
And
operations.
if you can't maintain them and you push off maintenance because they don't get approved through a budget, like that's just we're gonna.
Pretty sure the budget wasn't the
same
issue.
place.
No, it
Just-
wasn't, it
just
wasn't the
throwing it out
budget, it was
there.
the school board at the time that chose to stop the maintenance because they wanted a new school.
So that's the political side of that that I'm trying to stay away
They were
from.
literally in the middle of replacing.
Yes, let's move along with this. Because I think what we,
He asked the question, so I'll
Yeah.
answer it, because my wife worked there.
Okay.
They were in the middle of replacing the windows of the building, and all of a sudden, one of the janitors came up to her desk and said, they've stopped replacing the windows. She says, why? Because they want a new building.
'Cause the
So they're
original,
not putting any more money into this building. That was 5, 6 years ago?
the money
It
that
was
was,
before you
yep.
came.
The money for the
there.
CHS bond was supposed to be rolled into maintenance.
Yep.
That, what, $600,000 a year that was
Something
supposed to
like
be
that, yeah.
earmarked for maintenance and never was.
Yep.
So it is not a budget issue. It was a
Yep.
decision made at the school board
So
level.
you'd be looking at, from 2014 on, putting roughly $500,000 a year into that school, which would have solved a lot of problems.
So this committee has 2 problems. They have to jump that hurdle of what's been done in the past from previous administrations and get some credibility back with the people.
well, I mean, look, at the end of the day, we have to, we're here to solve the problem,
Solve the
right? So
problem,
like,
yep.
But it's a hurdle,
whatever,
yep.
whatever people in the past did, like, we can't control at this
No,
point.
but-
All we can do is come up with a plan for how to move forward.
But it's good to look at the history,
Oh,
so you don't make
absolutely.
the same mistake.
Yeah, like I can tell you that the CHS bond payment, from my understanding, what I've learned is that there were operational expenses that increased. So instead of, that's what that went towards, right? It went to operational expenses.
It went to the teacher's
So the
contract.
the budget would have had to.
The
went to the
discussion at the
teacher's
budget committee meeting was a promise that the deferred maintenance would no longer be deferred and would be caught up on. Unfortunately, Concord also chose that year to cut the funding to the
retirement
schools.
2 million.
So the discussion at the budget committee was absolutely maintenance. It's a bottom line budget. The school board can do with it what it did, and they did not do what they promised.
Okay. So, but either way.
So again,
as a-
yes, it was
as
a
a group.
past group, but it is, this town has a long memory. So
I
that is a
understand,
hurdle
if
we're
we're,
gonna have to
but
overcome.
if we're gonna be, if we're gonna be, we can either focus on trying to come up with a solution together, or
No, I agree with
we
you.
can say, well,
But I just don't want to say that it's a lack of budget, because it's
Oh, I-
not
yeah,
a lack of
that's-
budget.
Just to keep us moving,
Yeah.
and I think Reagan look at the next section and probably keep on with it. It's fixable, but reality of the building, we have a maxed out electrical system. Last year, we added a dedicated outlet for a copy machine to be moved down to the cafeteria, and Jolt Electric told Dave, that's it. Yeah, no more outlets. So we got the max electrical system. Because of that has like kind of downline issues. So
Is that due to panel or due to
I
line?
believe it's panel.
So we could
can
put
put
it
it
We can put another panel, but currently our current configuration is
Right,
maxed
no,
out.
it's just different answers. Like if you
Yeah.
have to draw another line, that's one answer.
And
If
that
you have
leads
to
to
put a
that
sub-panel,
leads to
it's
downline issues because obviously the electrical draw is just increasing in the day and age we have. We just have more electrical draw, so we have some classrooms that try to function on 3 usable outlets. Again, it's fixed, but again, we would have to do some upgrade in order to increase our
They'd
capacity.
have to have a transformer and a sub.
Plumbing,
There's 3,100 volts on the street,
Right.
so.
plumbing. I can't speak to the internal plumbing, the stuff I can't see, but I can tell you the stuff that I can see is undersized. It's outdated.
Probably need water filling stations and all kinds of.
Yeah, water filling stations, or just, believe it or not, we have bathrooms in the 50s, 60s building that are actually tank toilets. We actually have tank toilets in the school, which
You know how old those are?
I'm sure
As long as Bob
Mr. Leary himself probably
I
uses.
used them.
Yep. And then obviously you can just see the internal walls and doors. They're just not up to. They're just.
Put down the seat.
And then the bowing and the rising floor, again, it's a reality that's observable, that's part of it. I don't want to speak to cause or reason, but we do have classrooms that have that bowing in that, and particularly in the 50s and 60s building. I mentioned fire suppression in there, we just don't have it. And then also, this has been pointed out too, there are very limited stairs on the property, but where there are, they are, so the stairs that we do have,
The 1930s building.
in the 30s building, again, not usable, but actually it's more our stage.
Oh.
Our stage, both on the back side and the front side, are two-step.
Thought they had a ramp up the back.
They do not. You go into a tiny closet, which you could.
You can't fit the ramp.
It's actually a
I
tiny.
thought there was a ramp.
No, it's like a closet of a door that you would not even be able to turn a wheelchair in. Even if you put the ramp, you'd have to.
You'd have to have a lift, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, we put a lift in LMS last year, right?
Yeah.
Same kind of situation, it's a real tight little spot, and you had to kind of.
It's doable when it's little.
No, I worked for an elevator company for 34 years. I'm pretty sure that we could solve that problem.
I don't know if I trust you on that one.
Yeah.
Did anyone have any questions about the stuff that just came up with
Thank you,
building
that's
operations, or we want to keep going to functionality?
That's really.
I would say that the bow in the floor has been there
More than
since it was built.
Yeah.
Really?
Because when we used to take the teachers' chairs and we do races down the hall and you go up over the thing and, yeah.
So it's not in current moisture.
Tried to get it up one, never did, but tried.
Hopefully it wasn't your sister.
Some of them are more some of them are more pronounced than others.
Yes.
We discovered one this year that seemed to grow or reach a point where you ended up with this whole line of like the broken tiles that we had to replace, and
That's interesting.
it looked like something out of the movie Dune. And I just think it just kind of aged that way, but you had that kind of like.
They replaced a whole bunch of those because of asbestos, I thought at one point.
Functionality, Dan?
Yep.
Does the bottom of the floors cause any ADA problems?
No.
No tripping
No.
issues?
No.
I mean, the building's probably not fully ADA compliant anyway, right?
So the building is not ADA compliant, and also what we have discovered, just because of our student population, and this was news to me when I realized that there's a difference between ADA compliant and handicap accessible. And so we actually had to retrofit a couple of our bathrooms last year to make them wheelchair and handicap accessible. So you have the ADA compliance, which basically is about spacing and movement, but then the accessibility comes with the now you have the automatic soap dispensers, the lowered paper towel dispensers, things like that. So we've had to retrofit a couple of rooms that were put in because they were ADA compliant, that we then had to kind of retrofit at a cost to make them wheelchair or handicap accessible. And then moving on to the next section, which is just the general functionality, and this is where I think you start to get out of the construction end, and now you're really kind of just into general educational operations. And so the functionality of the building is, right now we have a non-centralized system, so we kind of lack that core. And so when you're talking about the core, you're really talking about the services that all or most students will receive being centralized, as well as any specialized service being equidistant to the students wherever. This is the ideal that you want to get to. Any service that the student would receive should be equidistant regardless of kind of where they are in the building. So right now, you have special services like OT and PT, and if you have a first grade student that accesses it there, it's, the length of the building.
You'd have to make it like a hub, a spoken wheel.
It basically, yeah. So if you think about like the Campbell was built with that core, and so kind of from any angle of the building, you're kind of always equidistant from where they are. So we don't have that. We have art here, music is all the way down here. OT, PT is in one area, speech is almost halfway down the building, and they have all been made out of converted spaces. So nothing was designed specifically for those things. The best we can get to is that the art room was made, I believe, specifically as an art room when it was originally was created. So it has those design features that you'd have for that specific. But the speech room is actually 1/3 of a carved up classroom. We have a false wall, so you have 3 case managers of special education in the 2/3 part of the room, and speech is taken over that 1/3. It's not specially designed space.
Which one's that, Dan?
Can I ask what
16,
would
17.
a specialized design space look like for speech and for OT? OT is occupational therapy, which is basically functional movement.
Yeah.
So I mean, that would be more like a gymnasium space. You got mats and balls and.
So
large
like
classroom.
OTPT, you would need, first off, you have, it would probably be on the larger side. You'd have a variety of built-ins, and then also a lot of their equipment
A
comes.
lot of built-ins, built-in storage, built-in equipment.
Built-in storage, built-in equipment to work. So oftentimes with OTPT, you'd see something like a built-in peg wall. Again, we can install that. So when you have a single-story building, often an OTPT would have some set of built-in stairs, because stair climbing is one of the skills that they would work on. You also have that larger space because where they may have equipment, like for instance the sensory swing, which not only takes up space but also has the clearance zone of space, while also they're working on pedaling, mobility, fine motor, gross motor. So you just kind of need that space. Right now they are in a usable space but not an ideal space for the therapy.
So there's nothing really particular about the space. It's just the size and how it's laid out.
But
Size,
also-
layout,
Location.
and location.
But
where it
also
is
the
developed.
location. So like in an elementary school, these providers are having to, these are young kids, so they have to go get the kids, right? So while it seems to us as adults like walking across a school building is not a big deal, we're losing time with the service providers having to go back and forth.
I was just kind of curious what is there something special that needs to be in that space?
No, but I think it's important.
Yeah.
But this is an important thing that like I don't know that we'd be having the same conversation in a high school where the kids can bring themselves to specific.
So if there's nothing particular about the space itself, is there any reason why we cannot relocate classrooms? Like reallocate space within the building to meet the location the desired travel distance?
What's currently stopping us is that the space that they're in is not large enough to be a classroom, and
But that's because there's a wall, right? It's a
no, the OTPT is
The old tech ed, right?
the best way to describe it is kind of a little ante-room off of what was originally designed as the middle school science lab. So it wouldn't function well as a classroom.
So that's room 26 or 27.
So if we were to add a classroom, then there's nothing that would prevent you from relocating this
27.
into another classroom.
I'm sorry?
So if we were to add a classroom, there's nothing that would prevent you from relocating this into a classroom with a better location.
If
Is
so,
there
let
somewhere
me go down the
centralized?
hypothetical road. The hypothetical is that any plan that we come has some sort of addition to it.
Right, so I'm just saying that.
No, I'm asking, if we have a hypothetical
Right.
where there's an addition, then I would lobby very hard that as part of that addition, we could somehow mix in some sort of core space, and then what I would do is reassign what was currently something else.
That was essentially planned into the worksheets that I had.
Okay, so
Yep.
again, it would just be a matter of relocating.
She keeps raising her
existing-
I
hand.
think it's a shame that if we're gonna spend any money, possibly $20 million, that we don't take these educational concerns for these most vulnerable children in mind. Some of these kids actually can't walk that easily from the portables into the OTPT room. You need the breakout sessions for the math kids, you need the breakout sessions for the kids reading. You need the OT, the PT. These are kids who really need someone to be advocating for them the most.
Thank you.
Back to that, some of the.
But my question ultimately is, we could create a core space if we had alternate locations for those that are currently occupying the ideal location to move somewhere else.
Yeah, so in my worksheets, I had accounted for some of that.
Okay.
And that's why, the option 1, repairs only, doesn't deal with that. But option 2, additions, renovations, would. But that's one of the reasons why demolishing the 40s and 50s wing, because it's the least valuable piece of the property, but rebuilding it in a way that we would be able to accommodate all those things and rearrange the existing building in a better, more efficient
And that would
manner.
also reduce some of the concerns of proximity to 3A, right?
Absolutely, but it increases the cost, and that's
No,
why.
and I get that, and
Yeah,
I have my own personal opinion as to what the right decision is.
Sure.
But in looking at this, how would it all fit together? And so understanding that if we were to move things around, we could address some concerns. We could,
Yep, but again, so you're talking about speech and,
OT, PT.
Those are the specialized services. In an ideal core, you'd have like your UAs, your art, your music, your libraries kind of in one core, and then off of that, you end up with your counseling, your student support.
but like your speech, speech require any kind of special design for the room? Is it just a room?
It is just room. Ideal dream world. You'd have kind of even in that space a core space and then breakout spaces,
Right.
so that you could have small group. You could do one-on-one, and the one-on-one they wouldn't be crosstalk. They wouldn't be.
Okay,
it's
I'm
speech.
just,
Yeah.
in my mind, I'm trying to get a picture
what
of
Yeah,
about
what
so
the-
ideally you'd have a kind of a core space that could fit small groups, but then off of that, or just kind of the speech office area that for the speech pathologist desk and their supplies, but off of there you'd have
Are
some
those
sort
things-
of isolated small group
Okay.
space.
Are those kind of things created just by how you lay out your room with furniture and things?
Right now,
Or does the room need to be constructed in a particular way to account for that?
sound and privacy is an issue if you don't have a real wall between the different spaces.
So you're thinking like a room like this that has then a little side room
Right.
to have a private conversation.
Yeah.
What about like the math pullouts and reading pullouts and all that stuff? Like, because right now we're doing a lot of that stuff. We do some of that in the halls. We do some of that in like the backstage area.
Yep, and then sometimes we do it in one classroom that fits. We have 4 tutors in one room. It's I'll call it auditory chaos. It's kind of all going on at the same time, and we do our best to create separation by placement of bookshelves and kind of creating like false spaces in the work areas.
But that would also, it would be beneficial to have that centralized, right? Because all grades are pulling to that.
Yeah, again, without naming kind of specific things, just think about the services that any or all students could utilize as best you can, making them equidistant from any classroom and in any of their regular ed spaces that it could be. So that the walk to art is the same as the walk to music, which is the same as which is close to the walk to the gym, which is close to the walk to the nurse, counseling suite. Any of that stuff is as centralized as you
And
can.
that's not just about convenience. That's about actual timing for caseloads, right? Because these people have caseloads that are so tight that,
Well, it's
that
caseloads,
actually,
and it's also about the overall goal of maximizing educational opportunity. And by maximizing educational opportunity, you want to limit or minimize lost time. And so,
Well, that's
any
right.
time that's lost walking is time that could be done learning or servicing. That's the ideal goal.
And that's the room you and I stopped and talked with. There's 4 different special
Yeah. So
teachers in there.
yeah, you're referring to currently room 28. Currently, room 28 houses 3 Title I tutors, an ESOL teacher who is throughout the district, but when she's in our building, she's in that space. We also have our math tutor, and then you also have it's the home base for our set, which is the 5th UA Skills Enrichment and Technology. She goes out into the classes, so that's the one UA that doesn't have her own space, but she does need kind of our home base for her Shabai. So you basically have 6 adults that utilize that space, and at any time you could have 3 or 4 student groups going on.
But I think the point was, and somewhat to the conversation, is they were explaining that their ability to do their job is so hampered by the space that they're not really responding to the needs. And that included, and we just add to, because that was important to hear from me, is that included helping kids with advanced type of
Yes.
encouragement, as well as students that just needed maybe a targeted mentoring for a particular moment in time, or some people that needed some special help. It really ran the gamut of all
Yeah.
students within the classroom.
Mhm.
And I immediately could see that that function was really hampered by simply where they were and how they couldn't respond.
Yeah.
So, I think it goes back to what somebody was saying here, is part of what, as we look at this, there is no way that, we are just gonna fix the building and be done, because obviously the portable classrooms indicate that we're beyond capacity now. We need to do something beyond that. So I think it kind of goes back to the way we started this is, as we look at the solutions, we will look at the functionality, which I fully agree is hampered.
Yeah, and actually that's a good segue into the next bullet, which is that,
Can I just mention one thing?
yeah,
But don't you have 25 to 30% of your kids with an IEP or a 504?
I believe we're 18 to 20 with IEPs.
That's still a significant
Yep.
number of kids that you're pulling out.
Yeah. So go to the next point. Actually, it kind of combines these two. Is that just counting the portables, we are 6 classrooms short of in the building, in the core building. We're 6 classrooms short. Ideally, for full operations, I would say that the number is close to 10 to 12 classrooms
So
short.
that's
Of,
not including the portables, or that is?
no. So it's 6 plus. We would probably need an additional 4 to 6 so that we could break out some of the rooms that have 5 staff. And ideally, we don't have 3 or 4 case managers all servicing within the same room. So we have first off, if the numbers play out the way that we projected, we're already 1 classroom short in the core next week, which means I got to make some hard decisions about someone's losing a room and a UA is going on a car, music or art is going on a cart. I have to make this. So we're already coming up against that. And so by adding just the 6 brings the 6 portable classrooms into the building, and then anywhere from 4 to 6 additional, so that 10 to 12 is really that kind of, if we're going to do an addition, that's really the kind of target number that we're looking at. That would allow us to break up in some variation. Right now, the reading specialist is paired with one of the case managers in room 10. She's separated from the reading tutor team because the reading tutor team of 3 is in that carved out room 5 that was carved to create that form of egress. So that's really a small space. And I say it's only 3, but it was, if you remember the tour, it's really kind of a tight space. You then have the room that I just mentioned, which has 5 and sometimes 6 staff. So by adding the 4 or 5, first off, I would have some level of flex space so that when you have that bubble that comes through where we need 5 classrooms and the next year you need 4, you can do that without having to swing and all of a sudden you have to utilize some room. So right now, for instance, our preschool, our 2 preschool classrooms, 1 is out in the portable and 1 is literally the center of the building, which is the old computer lab. And the reason why is that because we have a 5th kindergarten. And so the option was divide preschool really far off, or take a 5th kindergarten so I could keep preschool in the two unit, and then I'd have a 5th kindergarten could have been anywhere in the building. So I had to figure out which program did I need to separate. And really what it came down to is that the preschool programs, while they work connected, they also work independently. So unfortunately they were separated. So having that 4 to 6 additional would allow to break up some of the log jam that we have kind of in the classrooms, and also give some flexible space so that if we have that 5th classroom in any grade level, it doesn't mean that they're going, it's more space to work.
Question for Kyle. Dan just identified a need for 10 to 12 additional classrooms, assuming we do away with portables.
Yep.
Does one of your options or all of your options include that number?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
except for the repair zone.
Okay.
Well, just to put in
I think there
comparison,
were more classes in there.
there's 24 classrooms there
With that
now.
addition.
The new school was gonna build 27. So that corresponds that you kind of need an extra 3. So just, that's consistent in that number.
Is
But
there
and then
salvage
I
cost
should
for
point out in the
portables?
new building too, we
Salvage
had
cost?
what I was
Yeah, we
referencing
own the
before,
portables, we bought
portables?
which
them.
was those
Yes.
service
So we
suites,
need-
if
I don't
you
know
will.
how much. I know they're expensive.
Well, I just think where they cost us $250,000 or
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
So it'd be nice to have
Could be
some
something, right, yeah.
It's
you could.
So while we're presenting that it's gonna cost this much, if we could say, well, we're gonna save this much and we're gonna offset it with this
Yeah.
thing. So it shouldn't be all add. If we had the deducts to go with the ads, it makes your number look a little more
Yeah, but
palatable.
Sorry, I missed what what are you trying to deduct? I didn't hear what you said.
Trying to salvage the cost of the
Well,
price you get for selling the.
Well, I just, the selling point, one of the selling points for the portables was it would meet our space needs. At the time, we needed 3 spaces and we gave 4, and we were good for a while. But apparently that number wasn't true.
Well,
So-
was it true at the time? And it just
No,
it-
because then we changed all kinds of things the next year, and then we didn't need, class sizes automatically got changed. So no, it wasn't
So
true to
is
begin
your
with.
so are you insinuating that the class sizes are not appropriate right now?
I would like to take that conversation offline because I have my opinion on class sizes. So,
Okay, well, I mean, sometimes when you say things,
That's a
it's
matter
like
of
uh,
there's-
opinion that,
Right, but I mean, that's also something that we actually should be talking about if that's something that this committee, because ultimately,
but we could definitely talk about because it was not unusual to have class sizes 22, 23. So yes, so we do need fifth grade class or fifth kindergarten or whatever class because we hold strict to the lines. But in the past there was wiggle room. So it was like we know we have these many spaces. Would 22 be okay? Yeah, we can live with 22. So in the past there was a little more flexibility. Whether that's appropriate or not in today's standards, I don't know.
So
but
Those calculations are included in my worksheets, where we looked at kindergarten, first grade was one number, and then second and third was different, and fourth.
Kindergarten is one number, for 1 through 3 is another number, and then 4.
Yeah,
does that
and
cover
so-
the preschool? You said the preschool is a separate program.
that was not
Preschool is a separate program. Actually, preschool, it's not, the class sizes aren't dictated by school board policy.
Okay,
They're
that one
dictated
doesn't-
because our preschool is actually.
By
technically-
IEP,
It's
right?
it's a special ed program, so it's state law dictates.
So we spent some time talking about the class sizes and the number of classrooms per grade, and tried the best we could to actually be able to have some flexibility to go from 4 to 5 classrooms if you had a bubble coming up through the system. So that's been kind of programmed into these numbers.
Yeah, no, I'm just not even considering, making sure that we have an actual amount of numbers, and
Yeah.
we did buy them, so we do own them, so I know
We resell
everybody
them.
disparages them, but they're the ones with the AC and the nice spaces inside them. They're actually, I know kids who are like, yes! Portables, they have nice conditions in there.
right. And yeah, quite frankly, those were the only reason that I brought my daughter to the school because when I walked through it, I was like, I can't send her here. And then I went in the portables, I was like, I can send her here for a year. And then I just like the staff, so now I'm here. But
So to me, they're not a deal breaker, like,
So
they
the
exist,
concerns-
we own them.
right, the
So-
concerns with them right now is that from a security perspective, it's not ideal for the school. Like the
That's
school.
because the fence that was supposed to go in wasn't put in the way the fence
But-
was supposed to go in.
But I
He's
mean,
still
let's
going
just
on.
call it like it is though. I mean, even if there's a fence, when they're separated from the rest of the building for lockdown purposes, stuff like that.
What do you
that
do
is a
during
good-
recess?
What do you mean?
They're outside.
For
now.
security.
Well, they're at recess for a short period of time.
They're out there I live across the street.
Okay.
They're for 10, 15 minutes.
Right, but there's
So what do you do for security on the playground?
okay.
so-
There's no security issue. There's no security issue then. Thank you.
But
I mean,
we
so-
did.
sometimes you come on so hot with that, and it's like, listen, I'm not like making this up, right? Like when you were in school, no one ever shot up a school. Like that's
So-
just the reality of it, right?
We used
Just,
to take our guns to school because there was a rifle team.
yeah, there was no.
So there wasn't a problem.
Everybody had a
These-
gun in their car back then, so.
Right.
Yeah. So the reason I mention that is because there was a discussion about security at one point with the portables. There was actually money on a warrant article approved to put a fence in to fence around those. Tell me if that fence actually goes around those portables. Tell me that what was installed actually meets what was originally intended. So security was discussed.
But were we talking about an 8-foot fence that people can't climb over, or what
It
were
was
we talking
supposed to fence in the space.
about? But was it
around-
an 8-foot tall fence, or
Well,
was it-
you can put the
Because
paneling
we're
in
talking
it.
The concertina wire at the top.
Well, you could call it an 8-foot fence because you're in.
Again, if it's a matter
I'm an
of,
old man.
let's be real, if anybody wants to get in, they're gonna break a window anyway. There are ways in, you can be secure, and people are still gonna get in. So if you're putting a fence around, at least there's a barrier between the kids, and if you do the screened-in ones, they don't even see them as they transfer from building to building. So I appreciate the security concerns, they've been discussed, there's been money budgeted for it, and it's just that the solution that was installed isn't the solution that was discussed. So, I hear you, and I acknowledge it.
What are the other?
That's new to the game.
Right, and then go ahead.
Again, line layout versus cluster layout, just, what I mean by that is, while it looks like it makes sense on a map, it just doesn't foster collaboration necessarily and cooperative learning when your 4th grade, while it looks close on a map, I mean, there's a good distance between the first one and the second one when you're in a line, as opposed to any kind of new design in elementary school kind of has that cluster so that all the doors kind of open out into each other, you have that collaborative space. And then of course the functional obsolescence. You have a preschool that's in a room that was designed as a science lab, and so it's either not designed as a preschool and not being used as a science lab, You have, well, the 30s building is not functional. Computer lab is a classroom, and the nurse's office, which is a locker room, full with like the tapped off.
What was the
locker.
nurse's office before? Before
Showers.
it was a locker room?
It was a locker. It was a locker.
Was it always a locker room?
No.
It was a locker room. So
Well,
there's
the
a door.
nurse is in the same spot.
The
They've been
nurses-
in for 10 years, right? Or 20 or
Yeah,
whatever.
the nurse has been there for a while,
So
but
I
originally
know
the nurse's room was on the other side,
Yep.
the other side of the hall, beyond the office.
I think it had to do with the bathroom.
You mean
It has some water.
Which is now the student counseling suite.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the nurse's office originally when they moved. I think I was volunteer there when they moved there across the hall.
Okay.
I think it's in the same spot I've always known it.
All right, so let's hit the locational site stuff because I want to make sure we have some like direction.
Yeah, I mean the locational stuff is nothing new. I think everyone kind of observes the proximity to 3A. The two closest points of concern to point out in the tour is room 9, which is the room it's right next to the 30s building. That's actually the closest point to 3A that the building is.
Is there a door into that room?
There's a door that it goes not into the room, but it's the sliver space between the 30s building and room 9.
No, I see where it is. I'm just, we're
There
mentioning
is a
it's
door
proximate.
to outside there.
There's
Is
no
that what you're
exterior
asking?
door.
It's not in the classroom, but there's right in the hallway there. There's a door that goes directly out to.
So then, you're just saying room 9 itself is not a concern because people can't exit out through room 9.
Room 10 is actually the closest one.
Sorry,
He's saying in that
Yeah,
area of the
that's
building,
special.
that's where that.
I think that's what she's saying.
I'm sorry.
is that
I'm sorry.
Room 10.
It's a mistake. It's the hallway between room 10 and.
Okay, I see.
Actually, if you
Okay.
look at the map, it's literally where my little
Where it ends, right?
where it ends, right there. And then the biggest concern is the cafeteria because you have, at any point during the day you have a full class of students and approximately 70 feet from 3A. And then if you've ever driven by in the 8 o'clock hour in the morning, you know that we have traffic flow issues. We just don't have the places to take in.
Oh, you and Alvern and every
flow,
other
yeah.
school in the morning. Have you ever been stuck in the Alvern traffic?
Yes,
Parking.
every day.
People's driving on that, that's not, yeah, like, it's fine, I just think people know how to drive.
No, and it's not to discount it. It's just I'm saying that it's
I
not that
agree.
this is a unique experience. It stinks. It's unfortunate, but it's not a problem that's unique to Litchfield. It's a problem that it occurs at a lot of schools at drop off and pickup time.
Yep.
How we choose to respond to it, sure, will be unique to Litchfield, but the fact that traffic backs up on 3A is not nearly as bad as I have to sit in. Actually, I got hit in traffic at Alvern. So I totally feel you on this.
Let's face it. When we went to school, when Bob Leary went to school, if his mom was showing up at school, he was getting his butt beat. They didn't take you to school. You got on the bus. You went home. You got off the bus.
What
So
percentage, I
we-
suppose I should know this, what percentage of
It
kids
was
actually ride the
designed
bus?
originally to have buses come, drop the students off, and leave, and not for 50 or 60 or 70 people to be dropping children off.
I will say I
That was
never
not-
sent my kids on the bus when they went to Griffin, and I can tell you my reasons why. So I totally understand why people choose to
I-
drop off.
I understand, but this is
If
just,
I
it's
can
not
interrupt-
new, it's just the way it was designed.
There's actually a proposal in the Harris report how to solve that, or fix it.
Which would do what?
It would
Take that
actually
grass away.
reconfigure the bus loop to go in front of the 1930s building and separate the bus loop from the parking lot traffic.
Where were they going to relocate the oil tanks to? Did they say?
I don't think they kept. When I talked to Dave Ross, I
Over the top.
believe he said they did not account for. They put that in when they looked at the drawing and said, "Oh, I should have to go over here," and they didn't account for the fact that we have a 5,000-gallon oil tank buried under the ground there.
Oh, that'd be
The
fun.
point being is that there's a way to do
You change the
that.
heating system, don't you drive it,
Maybe.
The point being is there's ways to
You
respond
do
to
it at the
things.
gas station.
And you just can't say that,
Yep.
you know, you can't fix it. You can,
You can,
if you look at things.
you can.
Yeah.
That's the
And
point.
again, nothing in this report was to say that these are any fatal. You asked me for the
No, I'm not.
10,000 paper cuts.
Can do it.
These are the 10,000 paper cuts.
Okay, so
Can I just have one last?
yeah,
Kyle, when you talk about, this is the configuration you were talking about with the demolish and then add an addition that you studied, is that what you're?
Needs assessment, I'm not sure what's inside
so
that.
I asked him. You're talking about the
Mike.
thing that you were talking
Yeah.
to me about. So that when he went back and redid all of those numbers, that was based off of that, the presentation that you showed me and Dan last week. So meaning you went through. Remember the 15.6?
15.6.
So the 15.6, we asked him about that. That didn't include soft costs.
Right.
And that was presented at the time
Yeah.
because that was an early presentation of just here's some of the things that you're looking at. That was not intended to be presented as a final
Total
estimate,
price.
total price of what that was anticipated to be. So when we asked him to go back and do that, when you actually came through and asked him to go back and do that, that's how he came up with that spreadsheet that he has over there, which was the 37 million.
Really?
Yeah, I think I actually gave you
You gave
fresh
me the
copies.
37 million, but
Yeah.
I didn't realize it was to price this because, I
So,
mean, that's,
yeah, what was in there, that list of things was just to show sort of order of magnitude on the different areas.
okay.
Besides that, then the addition renovation option includes replacing some of those classrooms, replacing the portables, demolishing the 40s and 50s wing. So all that's not in the needs assessment.
Yes, it is.
Well,
It was. That's the basis of this needs assessment, the 15.
no, it's not. That's not possible.
Well, look, it is, it's right there. Look at it.
I think this was done long before
Yeah.
the renovation.
No, it was done in 2021.
Addition, $10 million. So you're right. That new gym entrance, or new entrance, new gymnasium, 13 classrooms, miscellaneous sports spaces.
And it
The
demolished-
worksheet that goes along with this includes soft costs, so engineering fees,
Yeah,
furniture, utility fees. There's about 25% in addition to the hard costs that go into soft costs. And that brings it up, what was the number I put in the email?
15 seconds.
No, but they brought it up to.
I say my rough math on it was 15 really became close to 18 because we added what inflation of 30.
Well, no, so the soft
And inflation
costs.
brought us to 18, and then soft costs brought up. I believe. I mean, the number I came up with was somewhere in the ballpark of 23 to 24.
Exactly. So, well, one of the things I think that
I forgot it's on my desk.
I've said this to the group a couple of times, but I'm not sure if everybody had heard this, that when we got hired was right about the time the pandemic was hitting us, right? And so a lot of the costs that were in some of these presentations were pre-pandemic numbers, because I'm using basically numbers that I'd assembled from the 12 months prior to when I'm doing the worksheets. And then the next 2 years from that point to this point, there's been as much as 20% inflation on construction for each year for 2 years. So the number from that pre-pandemic number to the numbers now have increased by 40%. I'm not making this up. You can go to the Federal Reserve,
We know you're not making it up.
Federal Reserve website,
See my bills.
and it's documented. Yeah, anybody in construction knows what the cost of materials have done. And so it's been very difficult for me to keep these numbers fresh, because every time I'm asked is another 3 to 6 months later, and the costs have gone up by that much more each time. So I'd like to be able to set the past in the past, and if you want fresh numbers, I'll do that. I did that in December when we first started talking about it, and that's where the 37 million came from. I did that for the bond vote proposal. That's where the 44 million came from. What I'd like to, just if give me a minute to talk about where these options, my approach to them, the process, and what might be helpful at this point in time. Again, we did 9 different options. The repairs only was the first one. The issue with the repairs only, and I think somebody has brought this up, it's kind of a Yankee approach to taking care of the building. You do a little bit every year, right? That's what I do in my house. Seems to work on the house. But the problem, and I think somebody else brought this up, is that you need to be able to package some of the work. If you're replacing ceilings, well, that's an opportune moment to put the ductwork in. It's an opportune moment to replace the lighting. And so you have to look year by year and put together a package that makes sense, that works on its own without integrating with other parts of the building. That's not easy. And when you do that, you'll find that one year you might have a $3 million project. The next year you have only a $200,000 project. The next year you have a $4 million project. Your tax rate does this. And that's not really good or easy for a school board to budget. And each year you've got to worry about whether the voters are going to approve that or not. So the next option, additions, renovations,
Well,
takes
can I
that.
just-
Yep.
There's a way to tackle that.
Yeah.
And you can ask if you come up with a plan that
Yep.
over 10 years, you're gonna spend $20 million.
Yeah.
Some year, 3 million, some year, 400,000.
Yep.
Just because what you said.
Yep.
But the tax rate's gonna be, you asked for, pick a number, 2 million a year.
Yep.
But it may be 3 years before you spend the next amount. But
Okay.
if there's a plan,
You're gonna raise and appropriate it every year,
yes,
so sort of like a bond.
yes. But it is a warrant article that simply says, we appropriate for X number of years. The point being is, I understand what you just said,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
you need to be potentially creative how to solve
But
that
at that
too.
point, you're taking the total cost of the project and you're essentially
Dividing it over 10 years.
dividing it
No,
into payments.
yes, I agree.
Hard to account for inflation and stuff.
Yeah, so there's another issue with
agree.
that then.
Well, inflation's high right now.
When you look at inflation versus the interest on a bond, as long as inflation is higher than the interest rates, which it is right now, your money today is worth more than it's going to be 10 years from now. So what ends up happening is the cost of construction continues to go up, and you're not necessarily getting money back on that. Whereas if you take that same project, the renovation project, and you bond it, now you flatten the tax rate, and you're beating inflation because your interest is less than inflation.
I agree that if we do anything, it's gonna have to be a bond and do do everything because it's too much interconnection, like you said, with the ductwork
Right.
and ceiling and
Right.
paint, lights. And
So then it becomes a question of the scope. Do we replace the 40s and 50s wing or do we not? And so that's where kind of where we should probably maybe focus some of this attention. I feel that the 40s and 50s wing should be demolished because the value of it in terms of its construction is fairly low. And if we demolish it, it gives us opportunities to get a fire lane access around the building. It gives us an opportunity to deal with some of the drainage. It gets the building a little bit further away from Route 3A. Now it gives us, the new addition gives us an opportunity to solve some of the problems with the special ed locations and that kind of stuff, and to maybe reconfigure some of the existing spaces. That's where that plan came up with, that's where the number came up with. And again, I was using the new school as a benchmark. How close to a new school can we get the additions and renovations? If the school board and the building committee were to say, well, we don't want to go that far, we want to go 80% of new school, 75%, or we'll do this fully but not that one, that's fine too. But for my purposes up to this point, I've kind of had to use the same standard for each option, otherwise you're not comparing them fairly. So it's not really a matter of, is this less cost or this is more cost, it's in perspective. So it's kind of what I'm getting at. The next, well, the third option of new school, what you get the benefit thereof is the new school, it will cost more money. There's no doubt about it. But by building new on a new location, there's a lot less disruption to the existing school. Your education quality doesn't decline during the construction process. You also get the opportunity to not just fix, but improve some of the educational qualities of the design itself. You get to improve the building efficiency, the energy efficiency. I've read reports that say that teacher efficiency goes up when you improve the building that they're in. So when you're talking about monetizing that, you've got less call-outs due to sick building syndrome. You've got teachers that are happier in their space and might work for slightly less money. There's indications that particularly younger teachers are happier with better quality workspace than they are with higher salaries. So there actually is a way to monetize this, and I think somebody brought it up earlier that we can't just be looking at the hard costs. You got to be looking at the human resources, the finance costs, all those things together. It's not simply the capital cost of the building. Lastly, what I want to say is that there are other ways to look at reducing the cost of the project, no matter which option you're looking at. The original RFP that was sent out for architects that I responded to and competed against with some other architects included not just efficient building, but ultra efficient building. We're talking net zero, completely heated and electrified by solar panels.
Don't go there.
I'm a big fan
Don't
of
go there.
all of that stuff.
So yeah,
And-
so like I was not on the.
And passive house design, which is a very high standard for energy efficiency. We respond to that. We were awarded. I'm on board with you folks. I don't necessarily think it's necessary. And if that requirement were to be removed from this project, seems I see a lot of
What's that-
heads
what's that in
nodding. It's possible to save 10 to 20% off the cost that was in the bond vote proposal. So I couldn't,
If it was 20% less, it might have passed.
Listen, Kyle was hired under those premises, therefore he was kind of shackled to those
Well,
premises.
I understand.
so if we could relook at that, and if the goal today is to lower the cost, which was not the goal last year. If the goal today is to lower the cost, I'm on board with that, and I can suggest ways that we can do that. When you look at the life cycle of the building, particularly with the lower costs, the difference between additions and renovations, or even the pay-as-you-go approach versus the new school, over 20 years, the differences aren't that large. But when we look at adding in the state aid, I don't know if everybody's aware of the situation there, that this project is number 2 on the rank list. We are behind the city of Concord, and they have a very large project they want to move forward with. But the state rules include certain limitations on what that building aid is. I know this for a fact because I've actually volunteered and helped rewrite the rules, so I know the rules inside and out. I have done the calculations on what Concord could possibly get, and it's not anywhere near what they're expecting. And the state has, over the last few years, maintained a pretty healthy budget for new construction. Last year it was $48 million. I'm expecting at least that, if not a little bit more, because
You can speak right to Rich when you say that. You can just look right at Rich.
because past projects, the tail is being paid off, and therefore there should be a little bit more money each year for new projects. So if there's, say, just the same amount from the year before, 48 million, and Concord gets somewhere in the 30s, there should be at least 12 million left over for Litchfield. Looking at the numbers, looking at the state rules, my belief is that this project could get 12 million from the state. So that's an increase of 7 million over what was in the bond vote proposal. So if you combine reducing the cost of the construction by 10 to 20%, I'm saying at least $5 million that I could take out by just removing that stipulation for passive house and net zero,
That's a no-brainer.
and then add to that the 12 million from the state. We're talking 10 to 12 million, or what am I saying? What did I just
12
say?
million plus
15 to
Yes,
17 million.
17 million.
Something about 30 million.
That we're taking off the $44 million bond vote. So we're getting this down to about a $27 million bond vote, not
And that's
what
if
it
we
was
decide
last year.
if we decide to pursue new school option. That's
Yeah,
not-
well, or
Well,
actually,
or the
renovate-
addition and
or the
renovation.
addition renovation.
Well,
So,
Either.
Clean both.
Can I just go back to this?
yeah,
Did I understand that this proposal in here that adds the 10,000 square feet and renovates the core is now guesstimated to be 24 million? Did hear
I
that?
thought I thought that you went back on those numbers and that's what you came up with, the 37 million. So we
Yes.
do need to clarify.
Yeah, I heard 37 million somewhere.
the additions,
It seems to me
renovations,
that there's a lot of confusion around what the numbers are, so I think it's probably wise choice to lay out all of the new numbers
it's
for
because of
each
the,
option.
it's because of the 40% increase in cost from the start of this project to where we are now.
But between all the different reports that I think he has and that have been already done, like, there just seems to be a lot of like, is it 20, is it 30, is it 15, like,
Did you cost
If
out all
we
9
can just lay
different
out-
options?
Did I what?
You said you looked at 9
Yeah,
different
so-
options. Did
so-
you cost out all 9 different options?
I did. And so we've got a new school on the GMS site, a new school on the middle school site, a new school on a new site. Option 6 was additions, renovations to LMS to change it to a K6, and then additions, renovations to Campbell to make it a 7 through 12. Option 7 was renovate GMS to a K2 with the middle school a 3-6 and additions, renovations to Campbell for a 7-12. Option 8 was a new early learning center at the middle school site, the middle school to 3-6, Campbell to 7-12. Option 9 was a new early learning center on a new site, middle school 3-6, Campbell 7-12. So each one of those had costs associated with the site, additions, renovations, soft costs, came up with a total. I also looked at the building aid potential and the long-term life cycle costs, which included changes to human resources, financing, and energy costs.
Do you have a copy of that?
Yeah, sure.
Because there's a couple options on it that I actually support.
Can you take a look?
That's something, and how
Can somebody
fresh is
send
that?
that to the
Yeah.
whole committee? Because you have people on here who
What-
weren't here like 5 years ago,
Yeah.
when you first started, and we don't have access
I
to
think
those documents.
that's a real problem, that there's so much information that I've given the committees and the school boards, but that's not necessarily been
I have
distributed.
7 file boxes worth of information from the high school.
Okay.
So I am not intimidated by
So
that.
what I'd like to do is to double check these numbers so that there's no more confusion about what the numbers are. And then if we could
It's
basically,
like, when was that done, you said?
A year ago.
a year ago. So we've already had another year's inflation on these numbers.
And it'd be wise to refresh it and then research it.
Right.
Can you read the options again, please?
Sure. Repairs only.
In a nutshell.
Option 1, repairs only. Option 2, additions, renovations at GMS. Option 3, replacement of GMS on the GMS site. Option 4, replacement of GMS on the middle school site. Option 5, replacement at a new site. Option 6, additions, renovations to the middle school to make it K through 6 and the high school to 7-12. Option 7, GMS to K2 and middle school to 3-6, high school to 7 through 12. A new early learning center, K through 2, on the middle school site. Same thing for the middle school and high school. And then option 9 was a new early learning center on a new site, middle school 3-6, high school 7-12. And you have more options that you'd like
No,
to
I
explore.
actually,
So the
my
K2
personal opinion is that we should consolidate pre-K to 6 and then 7 to 12.
Well-
So I'd be interested in those numbers.
Yeah, so I looked at this pretty closely. I gave Ron earlier the presentation I gave to the school board on that particular issue. And what we discovered, I was actually kind of interested in because I was interested in it because I'm working with the Diocese of Manchester on a Catholic school that's 7 through 12. And I think a 7 through 12 or middle school, high school, or junior high school is actually a good model. Kids are in one building for longer. It promotes their maturity rate a little bit because now you got 7th and 8th grade that's sort of competing with the high schoolers. But every high school that I've worked on or visited that is that grade configuration has the two schools somewhat separate. And mixing them completely together is not usually a good idea.
That's what I grew up with. I grew up with a combined 7 through 12, where the
Yeah.
7th graders high-fived the seniors, and it was, my experience, it was awesome.
Yeah,
I was gonna say they explained so many things, but
That's because Karen, you were the last person that would get bullied in my.
yeah.
People were probably afraid of you. Seniors were probably afraid of you as a 7th
To
grader.
be fair,
I'm afraid
my
of her.
sister
I am
did not have problems with anybody because I took care of it.
That's exactly what I would have expected.
So I'm not arguing that, but I think that the general population would want to see some sort of separation. When you look at Campbell High School, I studied it. So I've got the plans and I looked at each room, calculated the capacity, got the room utilization rate from the principal, so I knew which rooms were used each period. And basically what I found out was that there is certainly excess capacity there. But it's not from empty rooms. It's from rooms that are used 2 to 3 periods a day instead of 5.
But that can be adjusted with class schedules.
It can be. It gets a little bit more work for the staff because now you've got an English class in there one period, but it might be a math class the next period because you're having to combine rooms to get the extra
as a
space.
person who was in 5 different classes for 6 different periods, I feel that. But if the opportunity is that we can move, because originally the discussion was to move SAU up here
Yeah.
into this hallway,
Yeah.
clear up that
Oh.
SAU hallway. I believe there was plans for an addition out the front of the building.
Well-
So is it really impossible
No,
or
no, no.
feasible to separate 7th through 8th, address that concern?
So it's feasible, and I got the numbers.
Yeah.
So what we looked at doing was basically an addition to that wing, clearing out the SAU and the wing above it to make that the middle school, junior high, basically, if it's 7 and 8, and a small addition in order to gain the rest of the space that we needed. But it's the core facilities that became more difficult because now you still have just one entrance, and so you're mixing the students. But then when you get to places like the library, the gymnasium, and specifically the cafeteria, it gets really difficult. The cafeteria, if you look at it, is very long and narrow, and there's no way to separate out the kids. And that becomes an area where, the noise, the congestion, you really do want to separate. So I actually looked at, well, what if we took the music room and turned that into a junior high CAF, and then added a music room? Now we're starting to get into multiple additions.
You just schedule the lunches differently, right?
You
7
schedule
days
the
per-
lunches
per
differently.
year, this window and two.
Well, if you
keep two of
consider
those.
that the class sizes at the high school are currently half the size of what they used to be, you could probably combine 11th and 12th and have a similar lunch size we once upon a time had.
Right.
So
right.
I don't think that there's anything insurmountable.
No, and my study didn't come up with anything insurmountable.
Right.
That it's possible. Here's the next sort of downside to it, though, is that now you're affecting 2 buildings instead of just 1, and so the mobilization and the construction costs go up a little bit per square foot. So it's not as efficient as doing just 1 project.
But you and I both know that the construction cost is really, 5% of the life of the cost. So if we're phasing out an old, expensive building, the life costs, the operations and maintenance of this building, by consolidating, but there'll be significant savings, which in the long run will be more.
Well, you are 100% accurate that the operations and maintenance of the building is only 5% of the total cost of operating a building. It's the salaries that are the biggest part.
No, I'm saying like the construction costs.
The construction
While the
costs.
mobilization
Yes.
may be higher, over the course of 40 years, the construction costs are a small fraction of the
Yes.
operations and maintenance of that building.
Right.
So while it may be an initial higher cost, in the long run, you may save costs by not having to heat, maintain,
Yeah, but
other things.
Can't we
other third
use the
parties.
same argument for the new school?
But the
We now have
town
3
just
buildings as
voted
opposed to
down
2.
that, and you wanna raise it to a higher initial cost in the town?
I don't
Well-
think it'll be a higher initial, no. It'll be a higher mobilization cost,
So-
it will not be a higher overall cost.
So there's actually, when you talk about consolidation, and most people think, all right, consolidating means saving money. And that used to be the case, but what I've found is that there's a certain sweet spot. When you get up above 400 or 500 students for an elementary school, there's a lot less savings in consolidation. So that was the high school. We look at the middle school. The middle school has some significant problems for being able to change that to a K-6. Basically, the site really doesn't allow it.
Constrained.
It's very constrained.
But
It's
if I'm
tight.
spending 15, 20 million on a renovation, I can probably fix both buildings. for
Yeah,
you.
it's tight to a property line on one side. It's tight to a wetlands on the other side. There's steep slopes on both of the other sides. So I looked at where we could put an addition, what we would put in there for an addition, how the kids would flow from the addition into the main part of the building, where the front entrance is, all that kind of stuff. And it was difficult to get something to work.
Finger
You-
right out the front.
You also, well, if you put it out the front, you're destroying the brand new front entrance you just put in 2 years ago, and it doesn't really work in terms of traffic flow. So it's not a good option in terms of design. It's certainly not necessarily cost effective at that point. And like I said, when you get to that size building, you start losing some of your efficiencies. If you've got 100 students per grade, K through 6, that's 700 students. I think we decided that would be the 5th largest elementary school in the state. And that didn't seem to fit with the rural character of Litchfield. And so that, with the committee that I presented to at the time, said, that's not really what we're looking for. So that's the reason why that option didn't move much forward after that. I think,
But is that like a $10 million option though? Because like if Carrie's saying like if that's $10 million, then we have to at least present that. I know that there was a strong reaction even when we talked about having 8th graders go to the high school temporarily.
That was
Yeah.
different because you were shipping them midday forwards and backwards.
But
That
there
is
was
a
some feedback.
different
There was some
problem.
feedback. I'm not saying we can't evaluate it. I'm just saying that.
But the primary concern that I heard from the 8th graders was, wait, you're telling me you're going to ship my kid at the end of the day, or during the day, to CHS and back, and tell me they're not going to lose any educational time.
so back to this option though, the cost is somewhere between the additions renovations. It's more than the additions renovations for GMS. It's less than the brand new school. Again, long-term over the life of the building, to your point, the cost of construction is not really the most significant. It's the operations. And when you get up to that size building, you're not getting the cost savings that you think you're gonna get.
So I think the reality is my concern about this whole thing has been we're not looking holistically. Because at CHS, we are now in a situation where we have class sizes that are too small to support the classes these kids need in order to, so while we have larger elementary
Yeah.
schools, we have a lot of empty space. So how do we tell some of the people in the senior communities, please build us a new building, even though half my buildings are, half my buildings are half full.
Yep.
So, yes, the committees may not enjoy some of these
A third of
solutions.
these buildings are half full.
Well, if a third of my buildings are half full, I don't need 3 buildings.
It's not half though.
Well,
You like
see,
accuracy. I'm
But
just
everything's like a snapshot in time, right? Like, they may
Right.
have empty space now, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, 10 years down the road, do we have that empty space still? We don't know.
The trend,
Well, they do
The trend has
projections.
been
It-
down.
Yeah,
trend has
but,
been
like,
down
we don't know
for-
what happened. We're building all over the place in town.
So
There's
that-
gonna be an increase.
Sure, and
Children coming
we
in.
could discuss what the responsibility of the builders should be in providing a new school for students who are moving into town as a result of their buildings. But the reality is, but that is not the because,
Well, they do pay impact fees.
Impact
that's
fees.
not enough.
So lower enrollments at the high school is an issue that
I
needs to
agree
be dealt
with you,
with,
Carrie,
but
by the way, on it.
it doesn't seem to really, the solution for the elementary school doesn't seem to be connected with the high school problem.
Well, I think what you're gonna do, you're gonna find people like me who are like,
Yeah.
ugh, you have a lot of unused space in this district. Why should I build a new building when you're not fully utilizing what you already have? And unfortunately, the vote has indicated that there's gonna be a lot of people who
Yeah.
feel the way I do. So how do you overcome that? I
Well,
don't know.
and-
How do you
and-
turn me into the minority? I don't
Also,
know.
keep in mind that plan probably would not get state aid, so you're giving up $12 million.
What I already said, I don't.
Yeah,
Carrie doesn't want state aid.
It-
She doesn't care if they're gonna try to jam it down our throat. She
Well, I
doesn't
think
want
that,
it.
I feel like we could do it for less than what it would cost us to achieve state
We
aid.
can look at that. So,
I have a question
Sure.
concerning state aid.
yeah.
You mentioned the possibility of up to $12 million
Yes.
in state aid.
Yes.
Does that come with strings attached?
Yes, when we put in the, when we
No,
put in
not at all.
the application, it was based on the pre.
I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
And you
Yeah,
heard what we
trust
talked
me.
about, there's
Yeah.
been an increase of 40% since
Yes,
then.
I understand.
If we update the cost estimates, that's basically you take the 7 million, apply 40%, gets us up to the 12.
But what are the strings?
Bringing the building up to code, and also the building aid application listed out the spaces that we were going to provide. So we need to provide all those same spaces. So basically, if, just as an example, we decide not to build the gymnasium, or build the existing gymnasium's plenty fine enough at 3,500 square feet. We don't need the 5,000 square foot gymnasium that was in the building aid application.
Okay.
That puts that money at risk because we're not meeting what we had said we were going to provide.
Just that portion?
No, we need to meet all what we put in the application. If we don't meet that, then it puts it at risk. And I'm not the administrator. We'd have to talk to Amy Clark to see if one room would exclude us. But she has said before that they would be looking very carefully to make sure we're meeting.
And this at a state level is one of the items that I think we really need to address at some point, because state aid, whether it's a new building or renovation of a building should be equal, and they're not. They don't wanna give you money to renovate.
Well, that's not necessarily true. Actually, the old formula kind of favored some renovations, and most of the work that I've been doing lately has been additions, renovations, not new schools. So that's not the Monadnock project. So out of the top 5 projects that were ranked in this past round, my projects were Litchfield and Monadnock. Monadnock got funded, and we just put out to bid the Swansea Elementary School, which is an addition renovation. And I was actually able to negotiate a better funding rate based on the renovations, because the renovations didn't count against our limitations on square foot per student.
So I was at a meeting, and I can't remember his name, Ed Murrow.
Yeah,
Oh.
Murdo.
Murdo, okay, that's close enough. He says, he said at the meeting, I'm not giving you guys any money to renovate this school.
He's long gone.
Thank God.
So I just want to, I'm just going to claw this back because we're on the last minute here, and I want to make sure we have like our action items like kind of squared away here. On the topic of state aid, Kyle had mentioned, I think it was before the meeting, that we would need, the rules are in flux right now, they're not readopted, but the proposed rules state that we would have to notify as of May 1st if we wanted to continue to stay on the list, right?
Right. So the new rules don't go into effect until July 1st, so that's not necessarily in the rules right now, but I still think it's in the district's best interest to contact Amy Clark to let them know that we're still working on this. and to find out what the ground rules are, what would qualify for state aid, what wouldn't, and to really understand that a little bit better, because
Amy Clark.
and $12 million is still significant money, and if we can get that, I think it's in the best interest of the town to pursue it. And so there's no downside risk. If we tell them we're going for it, but then don't get it, fine, we haven't lost anything. If we don't tell them and you want it and you can't get it, that's too bad. So I highly recommend, I would like it if, maybe somebody from the school board or the new superintendent or somebody, that maybe the three of us would get together and talk to her and try to learn what our options are.
Okay, so we'll bring that back, although we have to bring that back before the next meeting, so I'll email the board on that. One thing I heard loud and clear from this group, which I also agree with, is we need to address the board as with respect to the RFP and RFQ to change the parameters of that to not be passive house standards.
What about actually evaluating the building?
So that was gonna be my next question, is what other next steps are, based off of this conversation, are we thinking that we wanna, push
So
forward?
to that question, those numbers that you had previously, are those not, like, evaluated the building to get those numbers,
So-
or are those just estimates based off your experience?
Here's where they came from, is there's been several reports on the building. Harriman did one, Turner Group did one, and then I did one. And so basically, I built off the previous two. So if they noted something as being deficient, I went and looked at it, it's deficient, I kept it on the list, and I tried to keep up with the inflation as it went along. But I didn't necessarily redo it or to do an invasive style of investigation. I didn't pull out soffit panels to look at the joists. I didn't, open up the boiler to see, how that looked or anything like that. I just went off of what had already been done, because there's no sense in spending the district's money, to come up with the same thing that somebody else already did. And so we're trying to do it as efficiently
You
and
still
quickly as
estimated the
possible.
cost of repairing those things.
But they were often, how to put it, very off the cuff estimates.
Okay.
That in my experience,
So it's not like a contractor came in and evaluated it and said, the
No.
roof is gonna be
It-
X number of dollars.
to do some of that, it takes a lot of effort, and it didn't seem valuable, because really what I was trying to do with these reports was to get an order of magnitude to be able to make a good decision. But if we're narrowing it down to one or two options, then we can hire the contractors, hire the engineers to go in and do a little bit more intense investigation. But, if the directive is, to do consolidation, and we're moving everything to the middle school.
We
Why-
haven't, my point
Yeah.
is, I will never vote to do anything until I know the answers to the existing condition of the building in detail.
So the last time we had a report, there was a warrant article for, I think it was like 20 grand for the valuation. So while I appreciate that, I think that if we want to go that route, we need to figure out how much is it gonna cost? Is it in the budget? Probably not, which then means a warrant article, which
No,
means
I
next
think
March.
there's money. I think there's money that's available.
Yes, but is that truly gonna help transparency? You have to think about, like, how's that gonna play out? Like, oh, we're spending more money without asking the taxpayers.
No, no,
Carrie, I think
Well,
ultimately
yeah,
Ron's
the same
right.
problem
We-
I'm not
you
saying
got-
we don't need it, I'm just saying, what's the mechanism by which you get it?
Well, yeah, but I mean, the question is really, if we don't do the in-depth analysis, we're just making decisions in a vacuum, so.
Yeah, I'm not saying we don't need the information.
How do we
Well,
find out, like, what we're
what's
looking
that
at for
gonna
a cost
cost?
to do the in-depth analysis? Like,
That's, yeah.
That's
If we're
my
talking 5 grand, one thing. If we're talking another 20 grand,
I bet
I
you're
bet
gonna
it's
spend
more.
30 grand
then
But-
to evaluate the building.
So this isn't like an on-off switch, right?
No, I know.
It's
That's
so
the
we
explanation.
in some ways, in some ways we already have that list. It's just not necessarily accurate, correct?
Right.
And so it's like a camera where we've got, or a set of binoculars where you've got a fuzzy picture, and we're just looking to focus it.
Well, by example,
Yeah.
everyone talks about the joists and the fish, and the roof system's not able to support a new HVAC system.
Right.
Who knows the answer to that?
Well, I can tell you right now, it doesn't. And
Okay.
the reason being, it was designed before the current snow load codes, and so putting
Okay.
anything on the roof is not going to work.
All right, how do we,
Interesting.
the next question is the existing
There's some steel foam.
roof good for another 25, 30 years, structurally.
Yeah, but really foam's-
You don't know, neither do I.
Yeah, we need.
No one knows
What was the
that.
last roof
Exactly,
problem?
until you look at it.
I have that
you don't know.
question written down.
But even looking at it, it's an engineer might give you a range or something, but getting a definitive, like, it's gonna fail in 2026. We
Well,
don't.
I guess how I look at it is like I look at anything else. What is the condition compared to new? I used to work in the railroads. I was responsible for the maintenance of the bridge structures. We had to evaluate all our bridges every year and make a determination of their service life. And there was rust and corrosion, a whole bunch of things. I had to do calculations based
Yeah.
upon what I observed.
Right.
And make a engineered determination of, has that corrosion gone to the point of making it a problem? Do I put slow orders on it? Do I need to change parts out?
So,
And that's what I don't know now.
So-
I've done those reports. I'm a structural engineer, and I can tell you that those reports are going to tell you, replace that, don't replace that. They're not going to tell you if your roof has enough capacity to do anything in addition to what it's done. That costs lots of money, and it's specific to what you're doing. And you have to have a plan ahead of time before you can say if you're going to be able to do that. Like, you have to choose what you want to put on the
I'm
roof.
not sure what you just meant. Say that
You
last
have to
part.
choose what you want to put on the roof and say, this is the rooftop unit I'm gonna put on there. Will this roof framing support it or not? That is a specific scenario where you would hire an engineer.
So
To do a condition assessment, you're not gonna get, that's got 17% capacity, that's got 32% additional capacity. You could put something there. You're not gonna get that level. You're gonna get that's rotten, you gotta replace that, and that looks like crap, you gotta fix that, and that's a crack, but it's just a little crack and you're fine.
Well, and that's what and even to that level, we don't know.
So ultimately, what it sounds like though,
You
you
don't
need
know.
a design for the air handlers, a layout, and then the structural engineer can tell us whether or not it can support it.
But again, like, are we gonna go through the cost of doing that before we know?
To do
Like,
what
I-
you just said is hundreds of thousands of dollars.
So,
To do
So
what?
you,
To do what?
To come up with an HVAC design to get to a bid, to do a structural engineering analysis to bid, to do all of your architectural stuff that you have to do, flashing.
well, could we do like a
to bid.
conceptual, this is where my air handlers are going, these three, can I do it? Or no?
You can spitball, but I guarantee you it's gonna change almost by
You-
twofold, right? It's gonna entirely get.
so you kind of already have that in my report. It's just very fuzzy.
So I guess the
And
question
so-
is how, again, it's gonna be one of those, how much can we narrow the scope in? And at
Exactly,
what point are you
exactly.
comfortable with making a decision?
So what I'd like to do then is to basically take what we've already got, work with the contractor, Bonaparte Stone, to see if I can't update and refine some of these numbers without spending a lot of your money.
I like you already.
I will never support it unless I have somebody go in and look.
So what is
What's
that?
the-
What does that entail?
look
Like, that's what I'm trying to figure out.
You can't do that for every little individual thing. The cost would be astronomical.
Let me talk to Bonaparte
I'm telling
Stone
you.
and bring
It's not
them
just-
to
it's
one of
not
these
Well, let's hear
meetings.
what Kyle. Hold on. Let's hear what Kyle has to
Hey,
say.
can
about it.
give me a quote on a new faucet. It's not like that. There has to be engineering specs and designs on a new roof system that someone has to pay to do before someone can tell you what it costs to install that.
The contractor that was hired, Bonaparte Stone, has done a lot of schools, and they're working on schools now. They're working on schools with me. They've got some numbers, square foot numbers. They're used to. I hate to keep using the word spitball estimate, but basically a schematic level estimate to give you enough comfort in the number, confidence in the
But what
number.
Ron is saying is he doesn't know what the scope is. Right? So we don't. I just want to make sure that whatever we go get, you're gonna, like, everyone on this committee is going to be happy enough with to be able to make some sort of decision as to what the next step is.
Here's the scope. I will go with them through this list and including some of the things that are not on the list to make sure that we're covering everything, and just update this list. And this gives us the repairs only cost, and that's, I think, what Ron is looking for.
I know, I think Ron's saying that he doesn't trust the repair.
He doesn't. He's saying that he doesn't.
No, until somebody looks at it and tells me.
We're going to look at it with the contractor.
No, he wants someone to go look at the actual physical condition of each of the items.
Yes.
Or you're going to go
You're
into the
prepared to
building.
Have the contractor go look inside
Yes.
the building.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
if you would,
So I guess you'll be scheduling the meeting.
what I would ask you to do is somehow put in what you're proposing in some sort of a summary that we can,
Take lots of pictures.
Yeah, so this is the opportunity for anyone in this committee who has any feelings about this because there will be a cost associated with this. You can get back to us on what that is.
Well, so what I'm looking at is let's do this at a budget rate, and to go through not in multiple days and putting things out to bid, but in a day, walk through with the contractor, looking at each one of these
The
items.
reality is the contractor has seen buildings like ours and will know going in, based on these conditions, this is what I expect to see. There's always gonna be the JTOW, joint tooled work, that you're gonna find you contingency issues, but at least he has a wealth of experience that he can draw on, hopefully make people a little more comfortable.
it
That's
does
why
have to be to a level, like, when we were doing the walkthrough the other day, it's like somebody said, well, I don't know what's under that ceiling up here, but I'm sure that, we wouldn't like what we find. Well, until you look,
Grab a
somebody
stick and
gets
move
up
it.
under a ladder and drills a couple of holes in there.
And that's why we did the walkthrough when the kids were in school, because we could have Dave Ross get a ladder and we could look,
So it still comes back down to do that, you're talking hundreds of thousands of
No,
dollars.
not hundreds. No, I'm not advocating taking things to design. I'm taking things to a condition assessment. That's very different from the design. Condition assessment.
This is something that you
I
feel
think it's a
is
fair analysis. Could we actually do a new HVAC
Let's set a number,
system?
$5,000.
What's the ballpark? If we could.
Is that an affordable amount?
The committee, has the committee, all right,
And
so,
we would spend up to that amount and get it as far as we can. Now, if there's still questions about it from there, we can do the next level up.
okay, so the proposal from Kyle is to set a limit of up to $5,000 for the investigation.
NTE.
It's 1 day in the site, couple of days in
We
the
can't
office.
approve that
I
expenditure.
have to go back to the board. I'm just, but listen, I don't wanna bring something, like, if all of you don't like it, I'm not gonna bring it back to
It's
the
a
board.
good time, I mean, into your funds you're supposed to be looking at soon, so.
So this is where I point out that the agenda item that we didn't get to today has to do with governance. So right now, this committee has absolutely no structure to make motions or make recommendations. So
But, I mean, we'll still bring it back.
report back to the board, I guess.
We're gonna, yeah, I'll bring that back to the board. There's no, but before we adjourn, no one else has any, because I do not want to spend up to $5,000 if anyone in here is gonna be unhappy with the scope of what we're doing.
I will reserve until I see what he proposes.
One thing that I would like to see come out of this is if we determine there's a certain portion that it just doesn't make sense to do anything with, all right? And let's say there are 14 classrooms there.
Yeah.
Let's say we build a 14 classroom addition.
Yeah.
Bare bones, straightforward, maintain the core,
Yeah.
update the core
Yeah.
with the new addition.
Yeah.
Will we be able to evaluate that alternative?
Well, you need more than 14 though, right?
Yeah, so,
But isn't that your renovations and additions?
That's, you've essentially paraphrased his renovations in addition to it.
yes, and it's, so all the different options, basically I use the same numbers. So for each option,
37.
if it involved additions, renovations, I use that same
Yeah.
worksheet that I'd come up with.
Okay.
And so that way it was fairly compared between the options. So the repairs only would go by that. The additions, renovations would go by that same list. The cost for new construction, we would use the same cost no matter which option it is, so that way it's fair. And it's the same number of students that we're supplying to. I've seen other districts who favor a particular option, and the one that they don't like, they're building for 400 students. The one they do like, they're building for 300. Well, obviously, it's going to be less cost, right? And I'm trying really hard not to do that, not to cook the books, to make the new school look good. The new school is not the least cost option.
Land is donated for schools.
Okay,
Can
so,
I ask him one question?
yeah,
And this is about one of your options.
Yeah.
The one where you had to build a new K through 2 at LMS. So what would happen with the other grades? Would that be 3-4 at GMS and then 5-8 at LMS?
No, I think the last three or
was 3 to 6
four
of them.
options had 7 and 8 at the high school.
Yeah, 7, 8 at the high school. Okay, so, never mind.
Which is
Yeah.
great
Bob,
for
with those
the
options, the
advanced-
K to 2 school bounced around. It was, first one was current GMS, like the building.
You just-
The second one was like a small building in the parking lot of LMS.
Right.
And the third building was using the Riley land, because at the time when we evaluated, we still had the Riley land.
So that puts the middle schoolers at the high school. Okay.
Yep.
So I'm in
So I don't
favor
like
for
that
an
stuff.
MTE of $5,000 to go for Kyle.
Second the motion.
All in favor? Yeah.
Sure.
I just wanna make sure that addresses his concern, because I still don't feel like Rob's on
I'm not-
board with
I'm
this.
not-
No, Ron. What will happen is Ron's going to probably pull Kyle aside after this and then like drill into it and probably also be there while he's doing it. I just know how Ron operates. So
And you're
we'll
welcome.
ultimately get to a place where Ron will be happy, right? I think is what we'll.
You're welcome to join us.
So
It's not a problem.
before we
I
adjourn
will plan to
tonight,
do that.
Someone's
Okay.
not going through like,
Bef-
to write down a detailed scope and like, we need 6 of these and 7 of those, right?
No,
No.
Ron picks
that's
up the
not what we're doing.
difference.
That's not what I.
All right. So
Order of magnitude.
before we adjourn, Dan.
at
go
the
ahead.
last meeting, it was my idea. I said that I think it's vitally important that we come up with mission, vision, makeup, and governance. And since it was my idea, and I think I'm going to wisely speculate that this is not a group that would be beneficial for us to just blank page this all together in one room. So I came up with just a draft. I'm not married to it at all. It at least just gives us words to work with. So I think maybe just to take it home and then we can make it so it's, please, again, I'm not married to it at all, but it gives everyone
A lot of good ideas.
something. Yes,
Thank you.
right.
Thank
I
you so
just
much.
don't
Yeah, no
think we're
problem.
good. We're going to be a good group blank page in this thing. So if we have something.
All right, and just to end on this note, my action items are we are gonna work to let Amy Clark know that we want to stay on the list for state aid just in case. We are going to go back to the board with the recommendation for no more passive house requirement to update the RFQ RFP. Kyle's going to update his numbers, and also he's going to we're going to get approval to do the further exploration with Bonnet
Well,
Pages.
the original one was originally non-voting. I don't know
Your
when it became
report
voting.
available on the.
And I'm gonna add-
Make sure we have it done.
When it was
Yes,
originally.
I'm adding that on my
It
list.
was non-voting.
Last year you confirmed it on voting.
Confirmed it because they've been voting, and I said, "What are you doing? You're not supposed to be voting."
Did you vote today?
No, originally the
I put you
position.
down as voting yes.
Originally, when this position was added, it was non-voting, and then somehow it morphed into a voting role. I'm like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah, that's fine.
After last year.
However you guys want.
Delivered that.
All right, thank you all.
It is on the written
We're good to adjourn.
Is it on there?
Okay, thank you.
Can I just
But I will be up there.
Oh yeah.
We should
Hey.
have.
I'm Brian O'Connell, new superintendent.
Sorry.
Hey, nice to meet you.
We'll talk.